Chapter 101, Entering the Lonely Mountain. Thorin stood staring at the secret door that Duir had opened with a single spell. For a moment, he didn't know whether to be relieved that the way in was clear or to fear that his back door had become useless. Whatever the answer, the door was open and no one lingered. They filed quickly into the hidden passage. The Durin folk had hollowed out the lonely mountain from core to crown. Smog lay in the main hall near the front entrance, so anyone entering from the rear had a chance of slipping in unnoticed. As former residents, Thorin, Balin, and the elder dwarves knew the mountain's interior intimately and guided the company to a concealed chamber without mistake. Along the way, they passed many dwarf skeletons, the remains of those who had failed to flee when the dragon took the mountain. When they reached the hidden room, everyone halted. Smog's scent was keen for dwarves and men alike. Any closer, and they would be betrayed. All eyes turned to Bill. The only way to avoid rousing the dragon was to rely on Mr. Burglar to steal the Arkenstone by stealth. If Bill could take the gem and get back out, Thorin could summon the 7 clans as king under the mountain and retake the kingdom without a direct fight. Thorin stepped forward and gripped Bill's shoulder. "It's all on you now. You can get the Arkenstone, can't you?" Bill shifted under Thorin's stare and answered awkwardly, I'll try." His voice betrayed the fear of one who must face a dragon. Thorin's grip tightened. "Not try, but must. You must get the Arkenstone." There was a hard edge of madness in Thorin's voice. Duir stepped between them and with a quick motion flung Thorin back. He planted himself beside Bill and looked Thorin in the eye with cold fury. "Thorin Oakenshield, Bill is not your servant. Show him some respect." Gandalf frowned and spoke with disappointed authority. "Thorin, pull yourself together. Don't let this madness eat away at you. You are slipping from the man you once were." Duir added quietly, "Maybe bringing you here was a mistake. The closer you get to the mountain, the more the dragon sickness in your blood shows itself. It's trying to make you destroy yourself." "No, I am clear," Thorin snapped, glaring at Gandalf. "Nothing matters but the Arkenstone. With the Arkenstone, I can reclaim the mountain and my treasure." "Nothing is more important," Gandalf pressed. "Your kin and companions are your treasure, Thorin. Don't let greed blind you." For a moment, Thorin's eyes flicked toward the worried dwarves, and something like remorse crossed his face, but it was swept away by fanatic obsession. He shook his head, cold and resolute. "No, they are nothing beside it." "You are mad," Gandalf said, exhausted. Duir's voice was firmer. "Don't argue. The nearer he gets to the Horde, the worse it will be. If it comes to it, we can knock him out and send him far away. Perhaps away from the treasure he'll find himself again." Bill's voice cut through the argument. "I'll go get the Arkenstone." Everyone turned to him. "If I get the stone, everything will be easier, right?" he went on. "Thorin can call the clans. Your mission will be complete, Duir and Gandalf, and I can go home." Silence fell. Duir looked at Bill and felt something close to tenderness. He crouched to meet the hobbit's eyes. "Are you sure, Bill?" Bill nodded with the courage of someone who had decided to try despite fear. "Yes, if you're going, I'll go." Duir no longer tried to dissuade him. He laid hands on Bill and muttered a string of enchantments. Protego Maxima, Protego Talum, Repello Muggletum, Impervious Silencio. Bill felt layers of protective magic settle over him like an invisible cloak. Duir produced a pot of mandrake from his spatial pouch and pressed it into Bill's hands. "Take this. If you meet the dragon, throw it. Its cry will buy you time. I've already charmed it so you won't hear it." He added, handing over a gold coin, "If you are in deadly danger, tap this. I'll know at once and will come to your rescue." Bill's smile grew brighter and more relieved with every promise. He hugged Duir. "Thank you. I understand." "Don't get yourself killed," Duir said, patting Bill's back. "If you can't take the gem, don't force it." Bill nodded eagerly. Duir released him, and Gandalf, unable to hide his fondness, patted Bill's shoulder. "Duir has done all he can. I can only wish you luck, Bill, and may the Valar watch over you." Duir clearly felt the blessing settle on Bill as well. Before Bill left the hidden chamber, Duir cast one last enchantment, a disillusionment charm to hide him from sight. It wasn't a guaranteed fooling of a dragon's gaze, but it was another layer of protection. Then Bill slipped away toward the treasury, moving like a wraith into the dark. Once Bill was gone, a heavy silence filled the chamber. The dwarves sat restless, nerves taut. Thorin's impatience grew with each ticking moment. "Duir," he demanded, "your palantir lets you see far places. Use it and tell us how Bill fares, or see where the Arkenstone is so we can plan." Duir's answer was cold. "Didn't you hear Gandalf? Using the palantir risks drawing the dragon's notice. If you want to die, don't drag the rest of us with you. And Bill is risking himself for you. If you try to slander or doubt him now, go and fetch it yourself." There was no goodwill left for the Thorin before them. The dragon's sickness amplified his greed into cruelty. The treasure had stoked a desire that came from his own heart. Then a sound rolled out from deep within the mountain, a deafening roar that shook the stone. It echoed through the halls and cut the air like a cliff-top gale. Every face in the hidden chamber changed. They all turned toward the treasury. Chapter 101, The Great Dragon Smaug. After leaving the Chamber of Secrets, Bilbo crept into the treasury. It was a vast hall piled with mountains of gold, silver, and jewels, a dim light setting off a tempting, oily gleam. Bilbo stood for a long moment, stunned by the sheer scale of the hoard, and then sank into despair. Finding an Arkenstone the size of a fist among these endless riches felt like seeking a needle in a haystack, made all the worse by the fact that a great dragon had been sleeping somewhere in the pile. He glanced about nervously, but saw no sign of the dragon. Had it hidden itself again? The thought made him uneasy, though the ring on his finger and the protective spells Dewey had cast on him offered some comfort. Moving as quietly as a hobbit can, big, padded feet, and Dewey's enchantments making him seem almost weightless, Bilbo tiptoed across the coins, stepping lightly so as not to disturb whatever lay beneath the gold. Searching for the Arkenstone among the glittering heaps was maddening, but after a long while of fruitless probing, he finally spotted it, perched on the very summit of the highest mound of gold. Thorin had said little when Bilbo had asked what the stone looked like, only that it was unlike any gem and that he would know it at sight. Now Bilbo understood. The Arkenstone was a flawless white gem, shining with a brilliant inner light, as if a galaxy swirled within it. The dwarves called it the heart of the mountain. It had been cut from the mountain's depths and set into the throne, the very symbol of rule under the mountain. Overjoyed, Bilbo hurried up the gold mound to take it. He had almost reached the top and was leaning down to lift the gem when the whole pile shuddered. The coin slid like an avalanche, and the Arkenstone disappeared into a river of gold. A massive head rose up out of the tumble, and for a horrible instant, Bilbo realized with a jolt of terror that he had been standing on Smaug's head. He sprang away, rolling down the slope and stumbling clear as the dragon's eyes opened. Huge vertical pupils fixed on Bilbo's barely there outline. "Little thief," a voice rumbled from those ancient jaws. "You carry no dwarf's or man's scent. What are you? And what trick is this that makes you vanish from my sight?" Smaug's long tail coiled outward, cutting off escape. "Yet I smell you, hear your breath, know you are there. You cannot hide." Bilbo swallowed at the dragon's bulk and dreadful presence. He tried to steady his pounding heart and faced those cold eyes. Smaug the Golden. I'm a hobbit. I stumbled in by mistake. I'm sorry. I'll go now." "Stumbled in?" Smaug mocked, amusement and contempt curling his words. "Tsk, a lying little thief. I have watched many covet my hoard, each one overestimating himself. And when he is caught, he gushes like you, hoping for mercy." A cruel, hungry light shone in Smaug's eyes. "Do you know how they fare?" Bilbo had a bad feeling. One hand slipped toward his pocket. What? "To be burned to ashes by my fire." Smaug's chest swelled. Heat rippled from his throat as flames began to gather. In a panic, Bilbo pulled on the ring, vanished, and slipped into the shadowed realm. For a moment, Smaug had no sight of him. "Where are you?" the dragon called. "Little thief, come out. Don't be shy. Show yourself." Smaug sniffed the air. "There's something of yours about you, something of gold, but far more precious. It is like what an old acquaintance of mine once possessed. Magic about it." His voice dripped with an irresistible, honeyed malice. The sound seemed to lay a trap in the darkness. By the time Bilbo realized the danger, he had taken the ring off and reappeared in Smaug's sight. "Aha! So you are here." Smaug's eyes lit with triumph, as if he had finally caught his prey. Bilbo felt the blood drain from his face. Instinctively, he reached into his enchanted pocket, pulling out a mandrake root and flung it toward the dragon. A soul-splitting shriek filled the treasury. The mandrake's cry echoed off stone and coin, a blade of sound that stabbed at the dragon's senses. Smaug's features twisted, pain contorting his vast face. The scream could not kill him, but it drove spears of agony into his head as if needles were pressed behind his eyes. He rolled and shook, trying to shake the sound free, but the noise filled every corner of the hall. Only when he smashed down and buried the writhing mandrake beneath a heap of gold did the cry finally stop. Smaug lay there, breathing hard, rage hot as a furnace. "Little thief," he bellowed, "you will pay. I will kill you. I will hunt down your kin and burn them all." Bilbo had already run some distance, but the dragon's vow of vengeance filled him with dread and remorse. No, he could not bear the thought of the Shire, or any innocent, suffering because of him. He pictured the green fields swallowed by dragonfire and felt his courage harden. He could not let Smaug leave the lonely mountain. Bilbo fumbled for the gold coin Dewey had given him and tapped it repeatedly with his finger, a small, desperate signal. Then, before he could think much more, Smaug reared up close, eyes fierce and cruel, ready to strike. "Avada Kedavra!" A sharp cry rang out. A stunning bolt of light lanced into the dragon, striking him. Bilbo gasped and, with relief and surprise, shouted, "Duir!" Dew arrived on a flying broom, swift as a shadow. He swooped in, grabbed Bilbo up, and swung him onto his back as Smaug's flames licked the space they had just occupied. Dewey's face was grave as he faced the dragon. Smaug, though struck, remained unharmed, the scales protecting him from ordinary spells. The dragon's attack faltered, replaced by wary surprise. He fixed Dewey with a long, suspicious stare. "Wizard?" Smaug rumbled. "Who are you, and from where do you come?" 103. Battle with the Dragon. Chapter 102. Confronting the Dragon. Dewey did not answer Smaug's question. The dragon's words carried power, like a spoken charm, capable of hypnotizing and bewitching listeners, making them obey involuntarily. Smaug's very gaze could impose control, create illusions, and manipulate victims through words and looks. Ordinary men and dwarves were utterly helpless. Once they met his eyes, they could be bent to his will. Even the horde that had lain against him for years seemed to carry a malign influence, driving men to obsession and madness. Thorin's inherited dragon sickness had its roots in that magic. Dragons had almost no weaknesses, hyper-intelligent, keen of perception, masters of foul enchantments and mind control. They breathed searing fire and possessed immense physical and magical resistance. They were a perfect, terrifying creation of Dark Morgoth. And now, facing Smaug, the only awake dragon in Middle-earth, Dewey answered with the most terrible spell he knew. Avada Kedavra, a blinding jet of green shot from his wand and struck Smaug. The dragon gave a long, mournful shriek and collapsed atop his treasure. The light died in his eyes. "Is he dead?" Bilbo, huddled behind Dewey, whispered, wide-eyed. Dewey himself was only half certain. Could Smaug really be killed so easily? Before he could check, footsteps pounded toward them. Gandalf and the dwarves hurrying up. The sight of the dragon motionless on the horde stunned them at first, then erupted into wild shouts of joy. Thorin Oakenshield's face broke into an ecstasy that bordered on disbelief. His nightmare was truly slain. His treasure, his kingdom, might be his again. Gandalf's surprise hardened into alarm. "Quick! Get back! The evil is not gone!" Before he finished, the dragon's eyes flared once more, burning with hatred. Smaug opened his enormous maw and unleashed a torrent of dragon fire toward them. "Protego Maxima!" Dewey shouted, throwing up the strongest ward he could. The fire slammed into the shield with a thunderous reaction. Dragon fire was unimaginably hot. Where it touched, gold liquefied. Even Dewey's barrier began to blister and crumble. Though it held them from being incinerated outright, the heat pressed in on them like a physical thing. Worse, while Smaug was showering them with flame, his massive tail lashed out like a battering ram, smashing pillars and rock. Gandalf's voice cut through the chaos. "Back into the main hall. Now! Don't stay here!" The dwarves scrambled for the safety of the massive stone pillars and retreated toward the central hall, Gandalf close behind. Dewey and Bilbo were the last to flee. A moment before the ward collapsed, Dewey leapt onto a flying broom, with Bilbo clinging on, and darted away, weaving between columns. "Revenge! I will have my revenge! Wizards, dwarves, hobbits, I'll destroy you all with dragon fire!" Smaug roared. Dewey circled among the pillars, keeping just out of reach as Smaug smashed through walls and swatted down pillars to bury them beneath rubble. Smaug's hatred for Dewey far outstripped that for anyone else. Dewey's Avada Kedavra had made the dragon feel, perhaps for the first time, the true threat of death. If Smaug's soul had been less resilient, the killing curse might have shattered it. The dragon was terrified and furious. He knew that if that young wizard grew stronger, the balance could one day tip against him. "Ah, Dewey, he's gaining on us," Bilbo cried, looking back in terror as Smaug flapped his great wings and closed the distance. Dewey banked sharply, dodging a gout of flame. As the dragon pressed, a thought came to him, an old spell used against dragons. He wheeled the broom and charged straight at Smaug, thrusting his wand forward and pronouncing an eye-stinging hex. Smaug, overconfident in his skin and power, was unprepared. Moments later, his eyes went dark, his direction lost. He slammed into the mountainside with a titanic crash. Though the dragon's body was nearly indestructible, his eyes were vulnerable. Dewey couldn't be sure how long the hex would last, but while Smaug writhed, breathing fire blindly, escape was possible. Dewey flew toward the main hall with Bilbo. Gandalf, Thorin, and the others were already waiting. "Bilbo, did you get the Arkenstone?" Thorin demanded, hope and greed sharpening his voice. Bilbo shook his head. "I'm sorry, I didn't have time before Smaug found me." Thorin's face fell hard and sour. "So our master burglar failed his task and only thought of saving himself," he sneered. Bilbo bowed his head in shame. I'm sorry." Dewey pulled Bilbo close and shot Thorin a cold look. "Now that Smaug has been drawn out, you might be able to slip into the Horde and search for the Arkenstone, but pray the gem was hardy enough to survive dragonfire. If not, I'm afraid you won't be king under the mountain." Thorin's eyes darkened with wild, mounting dread. The other dwarves exchanged worried looks. Smaug's flames were no ordinary heat. Common metals melted on contact. 4 of the 7 dwarven rings were already destroyed by the dragon's fire, an indication of how cruelly hot his breath could be. If the Arkenstone had been touched by that blaze, it might be gone. "Never mind the treasure for a moment," Gandalf said, firm. "The first thing is to deal with Smaug. If he lives, we all suffer, and the people of Lake Town will be in peril." Putting aside Thorin's obsession, the dwarves began to plan. Balin, the elder, suggested, "We might lure him toward the forges and use molten metal against him." Dwalin, Balin's brother, offered, "There's an old acid pit. Its acid can corrode metal. Maybe it could eat through his scales." "And we can prepare explosives," Fili added. "If they can't kill him, at least they can distract him." Tasks were divvied out in a rash of activity. While they spoke, a new prompt drew Dewey's attention, a small, otherworldly message that only he could see. "Hogwarts sign-in system, locating Lonely Mountain. Do you wish to sign in?" "Sign in," Dewey answered without hesitation. "Sign in successful. Congratulations, you have obtained the Book of Abraham." The words startled him. He opened the book to the first page. The moment he glanced at the title and the first lines, his pupils constricted and his breath hitched. Chapter 104, Sign in to the Philosopher's Stone. The Book of Abraham, originally called the Jewish Book of Abraham, was surrounded by legend. It was said to have been given by an angel and to contain the secret of eternal life. From that book, Nicholas Flamel had refined the Philosopher's Stone, an artifact that could transmute lead into gold, create panaceas, and produce an elixir of immortality. Flamel had lived for more than 600 years because of it, and in the end, he chose to destroy the stone and give up immortality. That was why he did not continue on forever. Dewey felt a thrill at having come across the method to make the Philosopher's Stone, immortality. Though still young, he carried a nagging urgency about time. Middle-earth was full of long-lived peoples, the elves who never died of old age, Gandalf who retained an ancient appearance for millennia, dwarves who lived for centuries. Thorin Oakenshield, for example, appeared youthful, yet was already 195. There were even humans like the Dunedain, whose lifespans averaged over 200 years, and the hobbits, who aged more slowly. Bilbo's extended youth raised Gandalf's suspicions and set the Fellowship's quest in motion. The War of the Ring would begin in TA 3.18. It was currently TA 2941, a gap of 77 years. Adding his previous life's age and the years since his transmigration, Dewey was still under 30, but if he lived to the War of the Ring, he would be old by then. As a wizard, he had a lengthened life ahead of him, but he did not want to spend it as a decrepit old man. The Philosopher's Stone offered hope, not eternal youth, as in Flamel's case. The immortality did not preserve perpetual youth, but it was a path, perhaps the only one he could access. There was no time to linger on that thought now. He stowed the book and joined the others to face Smaug. Dewey's blinding spell had disoriented the dragon only briefly. Once Smaug's sight returned, he smashed through the stone wall and renewed his pursuit. This time, he was cautious. A translucent nictitating membrane slid over his eyes, rendering Dewey's blinding charm useless. Riding his flying broom, Dewey dodged and baited the dragon toward the pit the dwarves had prepared. Their hope that corrosive acid placed there would melt the beast proved futile. The acid could eat through ore, but it could not pierce dragon scales. It merely gave Smaug an unpleasant bath. The dwarves' explosives were no match either, far less powerful than Dewey's own exploding bolt. Dewey led Smaug instead toward the forge. At Gandalf's strike, the great forge burst open and a flood of molten metal poured forth. Lava surged like a tidal wave and submerged the dragon. Did it work? Balin asked, eyes fixed on the bottomless molten flow. Dewey hovered on his broom, peering down. I'm afraid not, he said. Dragons breathe flames themselves. This won't kill him, but it might give us a chance to trap him. He lifted his wand and breathed a single word, glacius. An arctic blast shot from the tip and slammed into the molten flow. The lava chilled and solidified almost instantly. The surrounding air plummeted. Every breath became a white mist. The once molten gold crystallized into a hard gilded shell, locking Smaug within a coffin of metal. He shouldn't get out of that, right? Balin asked, shivering as frost rimed the golden ground. Dewey frowned and kept watching. He felt no movement, but distrusted sudden stillness. Gandalf, your thoughts? Gandalf peered carefully at the golden crust. We mustn't let our guard down. Dragons have other guile. Thorin, however, could not wait. Since he's trapped, let us fetch the Arkenstone. He strode forward, intent on reclaiming the heart of the mountain. Only with the Arkenstone will the 7 clans heed me. Only then will I have my kingdom and my vengeance. Don't move, Thorin. Gandalf's voice snapped like a whip. He hesitated only a moment, but Thorin ignored the warning and stepped onto the frozen gold. Beneath Thorin's feet, the golden crust darkened. Heat flared, and the solid ground swelled as if the mountain itself had taken breath. With a groan, it burst, and scalding molten gold erupted like a volcanic fountain. The lava sprayed in blisters of light. Thorin, closest to the blast, was drenched and hurled backward. Dewey swept him up with a flick and sent him crashing against the stone wall, unconscious. Smaug's head tore free of the gilded prison, melting the encasing gold with his burning breath. He crawled out, a living, flying furnace of molten scales, beating enormous wings as he bore down on the mountain's main gate. Revenge, the dragon roared. I will burn your lands and slaughter your kind. You have stolen my hoard and my home, and this I will repay with fire. Gandalf's face went ashen. Dewey, stop him. Don't let him fly. Dewey shot after Smaug on his broom. As Smaug smashed through the rock and sought the skies, Dewey thrust his wand forward and chanted a harsh, wrenching curse. Crucio! The spell struck Smaug's back like a hook of iron. For a moment, the dragon's movements froze, muscles spasming as searing pain tore through bone and sinew, as if some unseen force was drilling into his very essence. He screamed, a sound of such deep, soul-piercing anguish that it rolled across the land. The cry reached Lake Town beside the long water and set its people trembling. Even in the greenwood of Mirkwood, the Elven King's face stilled, his gaze narrowing, as if he could see the lonely mountain itself. Smaug's roar rumbled through the valley, and the battle for Erebor hung on the edge of a knife. Chapter 104, Cruciatus Curse. The Cruciatus, one of the 3 unforgivable curses, was not like Avada Kedavra, which killed outright. It was the cruelest of spells, created solely to inflict pain. It tormented body and soul alike. Even those with the strongest wills could break beneath it. Prolonged exposure could shatter a mind and leave a person a living husk. To Dewey's surprise, the Crucio's hold over Smaug was even stronger than Avada Kedavra. Under the curse, the dragon could not lift himself into the air. He writhed and rolled on the ground, screaming and groaning. Spare me, wizard, spare me! I surrender! Smog finally howled, unable to bear it any longer. Everyone watched, stunned, as the dragon that had once threatened them so pitifully begged Dewey for mercy. The dwarves were stunned and torn. Smog had driven them into exile and caused them grievous losses, and now he was begging to be spared? Dewey was not fooled. The Crucio caused Smog excruciating agony, but it was not fatal. The moment he let it go, Smog would recover and become even harder to stop. He poured all his malice into the spell and pushed his magic harder. Crucio! Smog's scream deepened into a perfecting howl of agony. He rolled wildly, his thrashing destroying the surrounding mountain. Tortured almost to the point of wishing for death, but still conscious, Smog summoned a last burst of strength and slammed his tail like a battering ram into the massive stone pillars that supported the entrance. The pillars cracked and shattered, the unsupported facade collapsed, and a cascade of boulders thundered down. Dewey had no choice but to split his attention to protect himself from the falling stones. Taking advantage of the distraction, Smog threw open his wings and with a desperate lunge, soared into the sky. "I'll remember this. Wizard," he roared as he fled. "I will take revenge. I will turn everything you love to ash." His open malice fell on the distant, lit-up shape of Lake Town. "You will be first in my vengeance. You will bear my wrath." Gandalf's face went white. "Smog is heading for Lake Town. We must stop him. I'll chase him." Dewey grabbed his flying broomstick, but Gandalf shouted, "I'm coming with you." There was no time to speak with Bilbo or the dwarves. Dewey and Gandalf mounted their broomsticks and gave chase at full speed. Erebor, without the dragon inside, was safe for the moment. Smog was fast. By the time they caught up, black smoke and dragon fire already rained down over Lake Town. Below, panic reigned. The master tried to flee with a boat piled high with gold and jewels, but his cargo made the craft too slow. Dragonfire consumed them both. Bard of Esgaroth, descended from Girion, Lord of the River, took up his ancestral black arrow and climbed to a high tower, searching for an opening. Seeing Bard, Dewey and Gandalf did not hesitate. "Dewey, lift me above him," Gandalf called. "We have to stop Smog from burning the town." Without a word, Dewey angled his broomstick straight up and shot them into the air. They came down over Smog's head. Gandalf sprang from the broom and landed hard on the dragon's back, driving Foehammer into Smog's scales. The blow hammered the weapon in until it stuck, far enough to hurt, but not to fell such a beast. Smog twisted, trying to shake the wizard loose, but Gandalf hung on to the lodged hammer like a stubborn burr. Enraged, Smog stopped worrying about Lake Town and wheeled to breathe fire at Gandalf. Dewey answered instantly with Crucio. The dragon's body froze and he screamed, plummeting toward the water. Just before impact, Smog spread his wings again, using the fall to break the curse's hold and keep Dewey from closing the distance. Dewey watched Smog's guerrilla evasions and spotted Bard on the tower, arrow knocked. He banked his broom and called down, "Bard, there's a gap in his chest scales, an old weak spot. Your ancestor Girion struck it with a black arrow. Aim there." Bard's eyes brightened. He searched the dragon's chest for the opening. Dewey kept pressure on Smog, trying to drive him toward the archer so Bard could replicate his ancestor's feat. Smog, however, had learned caution. Wounded and chased, he no longer fought carelessly. He tried to keep his distance. Worse for Bard, Gandalf on his back hammered Foehammer into him time and again. Each strike staggered the dragon, sometimes almost sending him down. Dewey swept in and drove Crucio anew. Smog twisted and fled in a disordered flight toward Bard, not realizing what fate awaited him from the archer's tower. "For Lake Town, for Girion," Bard bellowed, drawing the black arrow and loosing it with all his might. The shaft flew straight for the patch in Smog's chest. For a heartbeat, everyone thought the arrow had found its mark. Then a massive claw closed around it. Smog had plucked the arrow from the air and sneered. "Did you think I'd be the same fool twice?" he spat. He tossed the shaft high into the air and, as it fell, spewed fire to melt it into a puddle of molten metal. He smeared the molten slag into the gap in his chest scales, sealing it with a monstrous, viscous smear. Bard slumped with despair. Dewey stared in shock. He had expected Bard to succeed as he had in the old tale. Then he realized what had changed. In the original course of events, Bard's success had been the product of much luck and coincidence. Smog had been arrogant and careless, unaware of all his enemies. Now Smaug had been fought and wounded, driven from his lair. He had become wary, cunning, and cautious. The chance that Bard's black arrow would find the same vulnerable opening was far lower this time. 106. Dragonfall. Chapter 105. The Giant Dragon Falls. The black arrow had failed to kill Smaug. It had been melted by his dragonfire. Those who had pinned their hopes on it were devastated. "Bard, there's still a chance," Dewey shouted, glaring at the despondent archer. Bard looked up and forced a bitter smile. "The only black arrow that could kill the dragon is gone. What else can we do?" From his spatial pouch, Dewey produced a magnificent spear that shimmered with silver light. "This is Aeglos, the spear of Gil-galad, High King of the Noldor. It once pierced the Dark Lord Sauron's armor and wounded him. It has unbreakable penetrating power and is about the same length as the black arrow. Use it to strike the dragon." He tossed the silver spear to Bard. Bard took it, astonished. He could tell at once that this weapon was far more precious and keener than his lost black arrow. Still, concern shadowed his face. "Smaug's already wary. The gap in his chest's scales has been sealed with lava. He won't give us a clean shot." Dewey shook his head, confidence etched on his features. "We won't aim for the chest gap." "Not the gap?" "Not this time. Aim for his wing. I want you to sever one of his wings. Take away his ability to fly." He spoke with deadly seriousness. "I'll make you an opportunity. One chance. Can you do it?" "I can," Bard said, nodding firmly. Dewey studied Bard for a long moment, hoping fate would finally favor them. Then he swung his flying broom and chased the giant dragon. On Smaug's back, Gandalf was busy as well, one hand clinging to the foehammer sword lodged in the dragon's backbone, the other holding his staff and casting blinding beams of light to keep Smaug's eyes shut, forcing the dragon to fly erratically. Another Crucio spell had sapped Smaug's speed and reflexes. Whether by design or luck, Dewey and Gandalf's actions funneled Smaug back toward Bard. When the dragon came into Bard's firing range, Dewey unleashed a final, decisive spell with every ounce of strength he had left. Imperio. The Imperio struck Smaug. For the first time, Dewey felt just how immense the dragon's soul was. No wonder a killing curse had failed. The spell, aimed at Smaug's enormous will, felt like trying to move a mountain. It was exhausting, but it worked. The dragon staggered, dazed and slow for a few precious seconds. "Now, Bard," Dewey roared, veins bulging. Bard mounted Aeglos on his great crossbow. As Dewey shouted, he released the shaft. The spear transformed into a streak of silver light, and with a sharp whoosh tore through scales and struck the dragon's wing at its joint with the body. Smaug screamed and fell like a bird with a broken wing, gravity dragging him earthward with Gandalf still clinging to his back. With a thunderous crash, the dragon slammed into the waters of Esgaroth, Long Lake, raising monstrous waves. Even after the fall, Smaug's bulk left half his body above the surface. Gandalf stood on his back, uninjured, slamming his staff into the beast and sending out shock waves and holy light to press the dragon down into the water. Smaug tried to flap and lift himself, but the wounded wing could no longer bear him. He crashed back into the lake again and again, howling in fury. "No, it can't end like this. I will not lose," he raged. Dewey sent a blast of freezing air at the lake, and the surface quickly began to ice over in an attempt to lock Smaug in. The dragon noticed immediately and thrashed harder. "Do not think you can trap me. Let all be destroyed." He spewed scorching fire at the water, even at his own body, trying to keep the surface from freezing. The flames were fierce. Even on the lake, they burned along the surface and spread, threatening the nearby town of Esgaroth. Gandalf shouted, "Dewey, we must stop him breathing fire, or Esgaroth will be burned." Dewey understood the danger and leveled his wand. Aqua Eructo. Magic surged. The spell tore the lake into a gigantic whirlpool, forming a rotating sphere of water that trapped Smaug and spun him relentlessly, quenching the flames he spat. This advanced water magic, the same kind Dumbledore had once used in the Department of Mysteries, was difficult to cast at so vast a scale, but Dewey had the lake at hand and poured everything into it. Smaug tumbled inside like a creature in a wash, and whenever he opened his jaws, he found only cold lake water choking him. Dewey poured all his concentration into keeping the water prison intact. He did not know whether a creature as powerful as Smaug could drown, so he refused to relent. Channeling magic wore on him, sweat beaded at his brow, and fatigue crept in. At the moment his strength threatened to fail, a warm energy flowed into him, dispelling weariness and renewing his spirit. Gandalf had touched the Ring of Fire, Narya, and its fire lore bolstered Dewey, pouring energy into him. With that aid, the spell intensified. More water surged, enclosing the dragon completely, allowing no more escape. After some time, Smaug's struggles dwindled, and he lay motionless in the spinning sphere, as if dead. Neither Dewey nor Gandalf dared be certain. Smaug's life force was vast. He would not be felled easily. Their caution proved warranted. In the water prison, the dragon opened his clever, malevolent eyes again, eyes burning with unwillingness and rage. Wondered 7. Surrender. Seeing the dragon still alive inside the water sphere, Dewey frowned. He pointed his wand and poured all his strength into a transfiguration charm. The water globe convulsed and reshaped itself into a gargantuan python, far larger than Smaug, which coiled tightly around the dragon and then hardened into massive chains that bound him without mercy. When it was done, Dewey gasped for breath, his face pale. Transfiguring a creature of that size had nearly exhausted him. If not for Gandalf's Ring of Fire, he wouldn't have dared attempt it. "Are you all right?" Gandalf asked, concerned. Dewey shook his head. "I'll live, but first we need to deal with this dragon." With Smaug's mouth and limbs firmly shackled, the two moved in quickly. Gandalf climbed atop the dragon and wrenched out a heavy hammer lodged in its back. Dewey went to the wounded wing, gripped Aeglos with both hands, and pulled. Black, molten-like blood welled from the wound as the dragon let out a painful groan. Dewey flicked his wand and made the dragon roll onto its back, exposing its chest. They inspected a missing scale on Smaug's breast, where a patch of molten black metal now covered the gap. The material was extraordinarily hard. Where it patched the scale, its defense equaled the dragon's own armor. To an outsider, it looked as if Smaug had no weakness left. But Dewey tapped the black iron with his wand. It obediently softened and reshaped, elongating into a huge iron nail that drove itself into the dragon's flesh. Smaug thrashed, terror in his eyes. "No, don't kill me. I surrender. Spare me and I won't seek revenge. I'll even give you all my treasure," he projected mentally through the muzzle. Gandalf, seeing Dewey hesitate, warned immediately. "Dewey, don't trust him. Dragons are cunning. Their words are their weapons. They will lie and seduce you." Dewey smiled and shook his head. "I won't be so easily fooled, Gandalf. I have another idea." Gandalf's face tightened with worry. "What do you mean?" "I have a contract spell that binds both parties if signed willingly, with a witness. It forms an absolute soul-binding oath. Nobody can break it," Dewey explained. "I want you to be the witness, Gandalf. I'll bind Smaug to serve me." Gandalf looked troubled, but he listened. When Dewey finished describing the mechanism, the older wizard's expression shifted from concern to curiosity, and then to admiration. "You've outdone me again, Dewey," he said softly. Dewey turned his cold gaze to the muzzled dragon. "Smaug, speak up. Will you swear allegiance to me and submit?" He pressed Aeglos's sharp tip to the dragon's brow, a subtle, painful reminder of the cost. The dragon, tasting the chance of survival, quickly answered, a sly light flashing in his eyes. "Yes, I will." Dewey smirked inwardly. Sincerity didn't matter. Once the contract was sealed, any regret would be meaningless. He cast a silencing charm so that only he and Gandalf could speak, then blurred their outlines to keep the exchange private. He handed the unbreakable vow charm to Gandalf. From Smaug's side of the spell wall, he could see two figures moving and Gandalf's expression changing, but he could not hear them. After a moment, Dewey removed the silencing charm. "From this moment on," Dewey said, voice like iron, "you will obey my commands without the slightest resistance. If you hesitate even once, I'll let that iron nail in your chest grow inward until it pierces your heart." Smaug's unease deepened as the nail in his chest twitched ominously. "I hear you. I will obey." Dewey didn't waste time. He laid a hand on the dragon's forehead and began the incantation. Gandalf set the wand Dewey had crafted earlier against Dewey's hand, completing the ritual's circuit. "Smaug," Dewey intoned, "are you willing to submit to me and be bound to my will from this moment forth?" An unseen magic swirled over them both. Smaug felt it like a cold knot unfurling inside his soul. This was no ordinary contract, but a soul bond he had never encountered before. Panic spiked. He had always believed dragons could wriggle free of tricks or strike back when their foe was off guard. He had not anticipated a binding that would tie his very essence. The iron nail in his chest suddenly surged inward, racing for his heart. Smaug's soul recoiled as the tip neared the vital organ. "I agree! I agree!" he screamed. At once, the tip of Gandalf's wand spat a thin, searing tongue of flame, like a red-hot wire, that wrapped around Dewey's hand and Smaug's throat. The flame merged into their skin as a golden-red sigil. "From this moment forward, will you never betray me, never harm me, to the end of your life?" Gandalf intoned through the ritual. "I will," Smaug croaked. Another thread of flame traced a mark on Dewey's hand and Smaug's neck. "Will you always obey my commands and never disobey?" "I will," Smaug replied, voice trembling. With Gandalf's steady guidance, Dewey spoke a dozen precise vows, covering every conceivable loophole and linguistic trick a cunning dragon might use. Each oath left a pattern of glowing golden-red sigils on Dewey's arm and on Smaug's throat, mystical tattoos that sealed the promises. When the last word was spoken, Dewey released the chains. The iron bonds fell away. Smaug's body was free, but his will was no longer his own. If he harbored even a trace of malice, the rune threads on his neck would flare to red-hot wire, tightening and tearing, torturing his soul with agony like Crucio. Any attempt at retaliation would kill him outright before he could harm Dewey. The dragon lowered his head, the pride of ages broken. "Master," he murmured, humbler than any king in Dewey's long memory. Chapter 108, The Dragon Rider. Dewey was elated at the submission of the great dragon Smaug. Gandalf, standing nearby, was equally pleased. "Congratulations, Dewey. From now on, you're the only person in Middle-earth who can tame a great dragon. This is without precedent." The dragonkind had once been a scourge created by Morgoth, sweeping across Middle-earth and leaving fear and ruin in their wake. Though bred by darkness, their power and ferocity were undeniable. Sauron had tried to bend dragons to his will, but never fully succeeded. Dragons cared for gold, silver, and jewels above all else, and had no taste for ruling lands. That avarice, however, had forged an ancient bitter enmity between dragons and dwarves that lasted millennia. Thorin's ancestors had once lived in the Grey Mountains, but their hordes drew a dragon's covetous eye. The beast attacked, killing King Thrainth and his son Fror. Only Thror, the eldest surviving son, led a remnant of their people to the Lonely Mountain and founded the kingdom under the mountain. Later Smaug came, and the dwarves were driven into exile. Now that same great dragon had been subdued by Dewey and become his ally, a change that immediately made Dewey one of the most formidable figures in Middle-earth. After subduing Smaug, Dewey and Gandalf rode the dragon's back to leave the lake. One of Smaug's wings had been pierced by the divine spear Aeglos. He could not fly, only walk, so Smaug carried them toward Lake Town on foot. Thanks to their timely intervention, the town had not suffered total annihilation, though many houses set alight by dragonfire continued to burn. Such fires were difficult to quench. The people of Lake Town watched their homes smolder and wept. When they saw the great dragon approaching from the lake, a sight that had once meant doom, their despair returned full force. Bard drew his bow. Even knowing a single arrow might be pointless against Smaug, he refused to wait for death. Then his sharp eyes picked out Dewey and Gandalf riding the dragon. Startled, he hurried to the dock. The dragon's presence was still overwhelming. If it had opened its jaws and breathed flame, there would have been no escape. "Dewey, Gandalf, what's happening?" Bard called, alarmed. Dewey said nothing, only waved his wand as he worked to douse spreading flames. Gandalf slipped down the dragon's neck and jumped onto the dock, chuckling as he addressed Bard and the crowd. "The dragon has been subdued by Dewey. He obeys Dewey now and will no longer harm you." At Gandalf's words and Smaug's lack of aggression, the people stared in disbelief. As descendants of Dale, they knew the horror Smaug represented, how their ancestors had fled their homes and floated downriver to escape the dragon when River Valley City was destroyed. They had never expected this nightmare could one day be conquered. Eyes turned to Dewey, who rode a broom and waved his wand to smother the flames. Awe spread among the townsfolk. Dewey soon extinguished the great fires in Lake Town, but the burned buildings could not be fully restored. Dragonfire had warped and blackened them beyond mere mending. Seeing so many left homeless, Dewey felt a pang of guilt. The destruction had been wrought by Smaug, and now that Smaug answered to him, the damage felt in some way his responsibility. He took a small bag from his spatial pouch and handed it to Bard. This contains gold coins and gems. Please distribute them to those who lost their homes. Bard accepted the bag with a puzzled frown. When he opened it, he saw a space that seemed 2 meters deep, packed with glittering coins and jewels. So much wealth, it surpassed the fortunes of the town's richest merchant. There was more than enough to make every resident comfortable through the winter. Momentarily stunned, Bard felt no greed. He bowed his head in gratitude. Thank you, dear. I will accept these on behalf of the people and see they are distributed. Bard also understood that Duir's gift bolstered his standing. The mayor had fled earlier with only a boatload of coin and had been caught and killed by dragonfire. Lake Town was leaderless, and as a descendant of Girion, Lord of River Valley City, Bard was the natural choice to lead. Gandalf asked, "What will you do, Bard?" Bard looked along the damaged streets, determination hardening his face. We were forced to settle in Lake Town only because Smaug destroyed River Valley City. Now that Smaug is no longer a threat, I want to lead the people back and rebuild River Valley City. He added, firmly, the dwarves set out for the Lonely Mountain and roused the dragon. If they insist on keeping the mountain's hoard, they must compensate those whose homes were taken. The dragon carried off River Valley City's treasures to the Lonely Mountain. As Girion's heir, I have a right to a share. Duir and Gandalf had no objection. That was a dispute for Bard and Thorin Oakenshield to settle. After a brief conversation, Duir and Gandalf did not linger. They mounted Smaug and set off for the Lonely Mountain. The people of Lake Town watched, relieved and still trembling. Their fear of dragons ran deep. Even on the ground, Smaug moved swiftly. Gandalf laughed at the novelty of riding such a creature. I never imagined I'd ride a dragon. It's marvelous. Duir was excited too. He had not expected to be a dragon rider. His only regret was that Smaug could not yet fly. When will your wing heal? He asked the dragon. My wing was pierced by your spear, Aeglos, Smaug replied, his voice edged with grievance. The spear's power prevents the wound from closing naturally. Without some miraculous elixir, I fear I will not fly again for a very long time. Bound by the unbreakable vow curse, Smaug could not blame Duir aloud. He could only brood over his ill fortune at encountering his master's boon. Duir worried. Flight was a dragon's greatest advantage. Groundbound, Smaug's combat power and threat were significantly diminished. Gandalf, seeing Duir's concern, smiled reassuringly. Not a huge problem. When this business is done, we can ride to Rivendell and ask Elrond for help. He is the greatest healer left. If anyone can repair Smaug's wing, he can. Previously, Gandalf had feared Smaug would ally with Orcs, which had led him to support the dwarves' expedition to the Lonely Mountain in hopes of eliminating the dragon. Now, with Smaug subdued and seemingly on their side, Gandalf sincerely hoped the dragon could be healed, another powerful ally against the forces of darkness. They soon returned to the Lonely Mountain. At the main gate, they found the entrance barred and sealed. What happened? Gandalf frowned. It wasn't like this when we left. Duir surveyed the gate and let a sneer curve his lips. Perhaps some inside don't welcome our return. Gandalf's frown deepened. Thorin's recent behavior made the suspicion plausible. Smaug, however, peered at the gate with a greedy gleam in his eyes. Master, he rumbled eagerly, this wall cannot stop me. Let me smash it and kill the dwarves. The Lonely Mountain and its treasure will be ours. Duir's face darkened at Smaug's words. He snapped, Quiet! Though bound to him, Smaug's nature was unchanged. Greed flared in him at the thought of the hoard. He had no concept of loyalty beyond possession. If the treasure belonged to his master, then he would claim it as his own and even volunteer to guard it, ensuring not a single coin was lost. Smaug fell silent when Duir rebuked him, but the restlessness in his eyes did not fade. Chapter 108, Thorin's Madness. Duir, you and Smaug stay here. I need a word with Thorin. Gandalf did not want to see a fight between Duir and the dwarves. Duir alone had been more than the dwarves could handle. With a dragon in the field, even Durin's people at their height would be hard-pressed. Duir had no interest in the mountain's hoard and meant no harm to the dwarves, so he only nodded. Be my guest, he said. But I think you'll be disappointed, Gandalf. Duir warned. Thorin's dragon sickness should have fully taken him by now. Consumed by madness, he won't listen to reason. Gandalf sighed. I must at least try. He dismounted Smaug and strode to the blocked gate. His voice rolled like thunder. Thorin Oakenshield, come out and speak with me. No answer. Gandalf's frown deepened. He tried again, louder and sterner. Thorin Oakenshield, come out! Still nothing. Anger flared on Gandalf's face. He raised his staff as if to break the boulders sealing the gate. At that instant, a small head poked out from the battlements and waved briskly. Gandalf, I'm here. It was Bilbo. Gandalf looked up, surprised. Bilbo, where are Thorin and the others? Relief showed on Bilbo at being seen. He hurried to explain. Thorin's become very ill, mad, really. After you left with the dragon, he had Bofur and the others collapse the gate completely. Now he's got everyone tearing through the treasury looking for the Arkenstone. Oh. His words died as his eyes fell on the dragon standing not far off. Bilbo gaped. Gand, how is the dragon with you? Gandalf allowed a small smile. Duir subdued him. He is Duir's mount now. Bilbo rubbed his eyes as if to wake from a dream. After only half a day? Bilbo, go fetch Thorin. I need to speak with him, Gandalf said. Still dazed, Bilbo nodded and called for Thorin. Time trickled past. Gandalf's patience thinned. At last, Thorin appeared on the wall, slow and deliberate. The sight of Smaug behind Gandalf made his pupils shrink. His whole body recoiled as if at a blow. Gandalf, Thorin demanded sharply, voice trembling with suspicion and greed. What does this mean? Have you allied with a dragon to seize my treasure? Gandalf could hardly hide his disgust. Thorin's eyes showed nothing now but avarice and paranoia, clear signs of dragon sickness. He raised his voice so all could hear. Thorin, son of Thrain, you have reclaimed the Lonely Mountain. We rejoice for you. But why does the king under the mountain barricade himself inside like a brigand? Why did you close the gates and make your own folk prisoners? The reason is plain, Thorin shot back. There are thieves at my gate, seeking my treasure. The Arkenstone, the heirloom of my house, has not been found. I will bar all entry and exit until it is. Gandalf felt his chest tighten with anger. My Valar, Thorin Oakenshield, no one here covets your treasure. It matters not. He stepped forward. What you should do is not hide in your vault, but send word to other dwarven houses. Take counsel with the men of Lake Town, build defenses, make weapons. The danger is not over. Danger? Thorin spat. Unless you mean that you brought a dragon back with you, I see no danger. Gandalf forced his voice to steel. Thorin, wake up. The dragon has been brought down by Duir. He is not our enemy. The orcs could appear at any moment. We must combine our forces against them. For a moment, a flicker of reason crossed Thorin's face, as if Gandalf's words might reach him. Then the possessiveness of the horde snapped back. His eyes went cold. Gandalf, you are not welcome here. Leave. Gandalf's beard trembled with anger. Before he could answer, Duir's voice cut across, cool and flat. He had ridden his flying broomstick up near the wall, and now looked down at Thorin. You promised me 1/10 of the Lonely Mountain's treasure when I helped you reclaim it. Now that I have removed the dragon and given you back the mountain, Duir said, when will you pay what you owe? Thorin's lips thinned. The dragon behind Duir rolled its great head and rumbled a roar that made Thorin's hair stand on end. Fear, suddenly present, dragged a little sanity back into him. He stared at the wand in Duir's hand, then at the dragon watching, and after a battle of expression that made his face dark and strained, he ground out, I promise, when the Arkenstone is found, you shall have 1/10 of the treasure. Duir's eyes narrowed. And if the Arkenstone isn't found, or if it is found and kept secret, what then? Thorin's features grew uglier. Then, of course not. You swore to help me reclaim the mountain. If you expect a share, find the Arkenstone first. Duir laughed softly and shook his head. With a slight flourish, a contract drifted from his pocket and hovered before Thorin. I think you misunderstand, Thorin Oakenshield. The contract only required me to help you reclaim the mountain. It says nothing about finding the Arkenstone. That was never part of the agreement. And who can say whether Smaug's earlier fires didn't burn the Arkenstone to ash, Duir added. I have fulfilled my part. Now you must fulfill yours. Thorin's face darkened further, but he forced, Give me 1 month's time. In 1 month I will place your share, no less, before you, Duir replied, giving Thorin a look that left no room for bargaining. I hope you'll keep your word. He turned then to Bilbo, who stood not far away. Bilbo, will you come with Gandalf and me? Bilbo glanced at Thorin, then at Dwyer, then nodded. Dwyer set his broom down to lift Bilbo aboard. Thorin's voice suddenly rang out. Don't go! Dwyer paused, looking at him with a cold expression. Do you object? Thorin's suspicion flared. You may go, but you must prove you have taken nothing from the mountain. A pressure built in the air, a show of magic from Dwyer. Thorin Oakenshield, am I granting you too much? Do you doubt my friend? The air tightened so that Thorin gasped for breath. Yet he still snapped. If he has nothing to hide, why does he fear my search? Is the Arkenstone upon him? Dwyer's hand went to his wand, but Bilbo intervened, calm despite it all. He shook his head. Dwyer, it's all right. If he doubts, let him search. Let this prove my innocence. Dwyer snorted and relaxed the pressure. Thorin coughed for air, but his glare at Dwyer held a new, wary edge. Bilbo turned out his pockets one by one. There's that money pouch, he said. It's enchanted and can hold much. Disgusted, Bilbo opened the pouch and emptied it. Coin and trinkets spilled out with a clatter, forming a little heap on the ground, some of the loot Dwyer had taken in the goblin cave earlier. Thorin's eyes flashed with greed at the sight. Dragon sickness gnawed at him, urging him to snatch every piece. But the dragon's watchful glare and Dwyer's presence curtailed him. He forced himself to keep still. Dwyer's sneer was cold as he pointed at the scattered treasure. Search through it. If nothing is yours, put it back into his pouch and return it. Thorin had no choice. He rifled through the coins and baubles, but found no Arkenstone. Under Dwyer's hard stare, he took each item with visible humiliation, replaced them in the pouch, and handed it back to Bilbo. Dwyer then mounted his broom and lifted Bilbo into the air beside Gandalf. Welcome back, Bilbo, Gandalf said with a gentle smile. He had watched the scene and felt disappointment and sorrow for Thorin. The friend he once knew had been swallowed by stubbornness and greed. He also wondered at his own hand in the matter. If he had not set this adventure in motion, would Thorin have been spared this fate? He pushed the thought away. Thorin had long desired the mountain, with or without him. The three left the Lonely Mountain's gate and flew toward River Valley City. Bilbo, thrilled beyond measure by his first dragon ride, forgot the unpleasantness on the wall and chattered the whole way. By the way, Dwyer, he said, remembering, the mandrake you lent me. I've searched the treasury and couldn't find it. Could Smaug have burned it? Dwyer smiled. I should have told you sooner. I retrieved it, and Oxio does wonders. Bilbo breathed at last in relief. That's good. I thought I'd lost your mandrake. No more. Deformation. Deformation. Chapter 109. Transfiguration. Leaving the Lonely Mountain, Dewey and his two companions stopped for a while in River Valley City. Smaug was too enormous to take with them, so Dewey left the dragon hunting in the great wilderness near the mountain, ready to be summoned at a moment's notice. Many of River Valley City's buildings had been ruined by dragonfire. Even if Dewey wished, he could not restore them to their former state. The three of them returned to the house they had stayed in before. The fireplace there still connected to Rivendell. Dewey had not severed it. Gandalf was busy. After a short rest, he prepared to find Bard. He wanted Bard to lead the people of Laketown to relocate to River Valley City. River Valley City was easy to defend, hard to assault, and anchored by the Lonely Mountain. If the Orcs moved, the people could quickly unite with the dwarves of the mountain and stand a chance against the Orc host, rather than being picked off one town at a time. Laketown, by contrast, lay open on an endless plain with no natural defenses. If the Orcs attacked, there would be nothing to stop their devastation. For the safety of Laketown's people, Gandalf wanted to move them as soon as possible. If he could, he also hoped to persuade Thranduil to join an alliance against the Orcs. After Smaug was subdued, Dewey and Gandalf questioned him about any dealings with the Orcs. Smaug, who feared little, hid nothing. He said the Orcs had approached him even before Azog's time, trying to win his cooperation, but Smaug cared only for his horde and had no interest in ruling or conquering Middle-earth, so he refused. Only recently had Bolg, Azog's son, contacted him, telling him that Thorin Oakenshield intended to reclaim the Lonely Mountain. Bolg used that opportunity. He let his Orc army enter the mountain's territory and moved north to reclaim the old realm of Angmar. In return, the Orcs recognized Smaug's dominion over the Lonely Mountain and promised the dragon half the treasure they plundered. Now that Smaug had been subdued, that news would not go unanswered. Bolg would hardly stay idle. He would likely launch a major attack on the Lonely Mountain to seize this strategic stronghold. While Gandalf hurried preparations for the coming war, Dewey had another pressing matter. At sunrise one morning, as usual, Dewey touched the tip of his wand to his chest and whispered, "Amato, animo, animato, animagus." When the last syllable fell away, it felt as if a second heartbeat thudded in his ribs, a faint echo answering his own, a strange, thrilling duet. Dewey took it as a good omen for his animagus transfiguration. He pulled out the palantir to check weather at the high pass in the misty mountains. Seeing the pass shrouded in black clouds and lightning, he set off at once. He left Bilbo in River Valley City, teleported to Rivendell by the fireplace, and, without stopping, mounted his flying broomstick and headed for the misty mountains. The high pass was lashed by rain and struck by constant lightning. Riding low to avoid the bolts, Dewey went to the spot where he had buried a small crystal vial and dug it up. The mixture inside had turned blood red. Seeing the potion, his eyes gleamed. Without delay, he returned toward Rivendell. Only one step remained to complete his animagus transfiguration. Back in Rivendell, Dewey did not return to River Valley City via the fireplace. He stayed. The process required a spacious, secure place where he would not be disturbed. Elrond, recently returned from Lorien, greeted him with a smile. "Dewey, was your journey smooth?" he asked. Dewey nodded and asked for help. "Lord Elrond, could you give me a chamber where I won't be disturbed? I need to ensure nothing goes wrong during the transfiguration." Elrond, naturally curious and willing, led him to a wide hall. There were no tables, only two fireplaces set between pairs of pillars, their flames burning without any logs, giving warmth and light year-round. Mysterious elven runes were carved into the marble floor. As Dewey entered, a surge of clarity ran through him. "This is the Hall of Flames," Elrond said. "When I seek quiet for thought and meditation, I come here. You may perform your transfiguration here. No one will disturb you." Dewey had not expected such a place in Rivendell. Practicing magic here felt several times more potent than elsewhere, and his confidence grew. He thanked Elrond and concentrated. Once more he pressed his wand to his chest and intoned, "Amato, animo, animato, animagus," then opened the crystal vial and drank the red liquid at a single swallow. 2 heartbeats erupted from his chest, loud enough to echo in the empty hall. Pain followed, intense, as if his entire body were being remade, a tearing, reshaping agony comparable to the worst of curses. An animal image formed in his mind, growing clearer. Dewey held his will steady and refused to resist. His body shrank. His clothes, jewelry, and possessions seemed to melt into his skin, becoming feathers. When the pain subsided, only a huge owl remained in the hall, a Eurasian eagle owl. Its round head bore characteristic ear tufts, plumage mixed yellows and blacks. Its eyes were large and gold, sharp and cold. Its hooked beak and powerful talons hid deadly blades. The owl was massive, larger than ordinary, standing nearly a meter tall, with a wingspan over 3 meters. In his first transformation, Dewey felt disoriented. He peered at his reflection on the polished floor. "So my animagus matches my Patronus, an owl," he thought, equal parts surprised and unsurprised. It wasn't the noble raptor he'd secretly preferred, but an owl would do. Excellent flight, night vision, and acute hearing, ideal for stealth. That did not mean he could fly at once. He beat his wings and tried again and again inside the hall, stumbling and tumbling, scattering feathers across the marble, until finally he managed to lift into the air. Flying without a broom was an entirely different sensation, intimate and raw. The hall felt confining, so he slipped through a window and soared above Rivendell, circling to take in the landscape. On the observation deck below, Elrond watched him and smiled. When Dewey had flown his fill, he returned and transformed back into a man upon landing. "Thank you for your help, Lord Elrond. I couldn't have succeeded so quickly without you," he said. Elrond waved the praise away. "This was your effort. I only gave you the space." "By the way," Elrond asked, "how did your mission go this time?" Dewey summarized the events at the Lonely Mountain. When he mentioned subduing Smaug, even well-informed Elrond was astonished. Since dragons were first made, none had been subdued except by Morgoth himself, not even Sauron. That had now changed. Elrond worried at first that Smaug might be tricking them. But when he heard about the unbreakable vow and that Gandalf had witnessed the agreement, he relaxed. He trusted Gandalf's judgment and agreed to heal the dragon's wounds. Dewey did not linger in Rivendell. He returned to River Valley City, but not by fireplace. He transformed into his owl and set off across the misty mountains to practice. Though he had mastered the animagus transformation, it was still basic. He could not yet transform without his wand. A true master, like McGonagall, could change without a wand and even incorporate the wand into themselves. Dewey needed constant practice until the change became second nature. He flew high over the misty mountains and saw signs of trolls, orcs, and wargs. He did not stop. Flying eastward, he crossed the range and reached the eastern side, where he met the great eagles. The eagles spotted him and came racing in. Dewey worried they saw him as prey and prepared to change back when a voice sounded. "What are you? You look like an owl, but you don't smell like one. You have a human scent." A great eagle circled him, curious, peering closely. 111. Giant Eagle Delivers Cub. Chapter 110. The Eagle King Sends a Chick. Dewey breathed a sigh of relief when it became clear the Eagle King had no intention of attacking. Then, even more astonished, he cried out, "You can talk? Wait, do I understand you?" A strange look lit the bird's sharp eyes. "I am a messenger of Manwë, king of the Valar and lord of all birds. Naturally, I can speak with all winged things." "But what are you? You look like an owl, yet you smell of man." "I am not a thing, ah? Well, I am a thing." The Eagle King's answer trailed off in an expression that was almost bemused. Dewey felt his mind a little slow after his transformation into a bird and hurried to introduce himself. "I am Wizard Dewey. You gave Gandalf and me a ride across the misty mountains. Do you remember?" Recognition dawned on the Eagle King. "I remember you, the wizard who was with Gandalf. You slew Azog, the Orc King, then." "That was me," Dewey nodded. "But why do you take the form of a bird? I recall you as human once." "This is a magical transformation. I can take animal form." "Sounds like a skin changer." The Eagle King's interest sharpened at the idea of a wizard who could change into a bird and converse with them. He invited Dewey to the Eyrie. They alighted on a wide rock shelf on a cliff near High Pass and the old goblin town. On it, the eagles had built enormous nests of thick, intertwined branches, padded with finer twigs, feathers, and even whole warg skins. Landing among them, Dewey felt as if he had stumbled into the realm of giants. The Eagle Kings, curious and wise, observed him with keen interest. They offered fruit from the misty mountains and a half-dead warg they had found, all with eager hospitality that left Dewey a little overwhelmed. Among the brood in the nest were newly hatched chicks, each larger than Dewey in his bird form and noisy with peeps. But one chick lay apart, small, weak, its cry thin compared to its siblings. It seemed congenitally frail, unable to compete for food. The parents treated it with indifferent practicality. They made no sign of special care. Dewey frowned. In nature, the fittest survive. Ordinary eagles sometimes abandon or even kill weak young. But the Eagle Kings were a wise race. Would they do the same? It felt improper to interfere, yet he could not ignore the sight. The Eagle King seemed to read his thoughts and sighed. "Our folk dwell here among the misty mountains," he said. "We fight wargs and orcs and other terrors daily. Only the strong survive these heights. The weak are often lost. Perhaps an early return to Manwë's halls is the kindest end for them. But Wizard Dewey," he added, "if you are moved by compassion, you may take this child and give him a home. It could be a new beginning." "Me? Take him?" Dewey stared, incredulous that the eagles would offer a chick away. The Eagle King nodded. The parents had no objection. Dewey looked at the thin, pitiful bird. For a long moment, he was speechless. "Little one, do you want to come with me?" he asked, shifting back into human form and producing some dried meat from his pouch. Eagle King chicks mature slowly. Even under 3 years, this one understood speech well enough. Starved for food, it reddened at the sight of the meat. As its siblings lunged, the chick swallowed the morsel hungrily, eyed Dewey's kindly face, then its indifferent parents and quarreling brothers, and at last nodded. Dewey accepted the chick. He used an undetectable extension charm to expand the interior of a money pouch to a diameter of 10 meters, the largest he could manage for now, which would be enough for the chick to live inside. The Eagle King gifted a nest as well. a fragrant nest said to have been used when he himself hatched, along with feathers, eggshells, and warg skins. The great feathers could serve for wand cores, the eggshells for potions, the warg skins, as Dewar dryly noted, would make comfortable cushions. After farewells, the wizard shifted back into his Eurasian eagle owl form, took the enchanted pouch and the nest, and set off eastward. Inside that pocket space, the chick buried itself in the food Dewar had stored. Having never been full since hatching, it focused on the one thing that mattered to it: eating. Forgotten were sorrow and abandonment. To the little bird, where there was food, there was home. Dewar crossed the misty mountains but did not fly straight for the lonely mountain. He circled above Bjorn's homestead and dropped down. "Who's there?" Bjorn noticed the odd shadow and watched warily as an eagle owl alighted. When the bird morphed back into a man, his vigilance melted into a broad grin. "Bjorn, long time no see," Dewar said, smiling. "It's you, Dewar." Bjorn's face brightened. "Was that your animal form just now? If skin changers didn't all become great bears, I'd think you family." Dewar chuckled. "I was passing by and thought I'd visit. This animagus thing, I've just learned my own switching, but I can only become a plain animal. It's not as fine as yours." Bjorn's envy was frank. "I'd trade my clumsy bear for a flying body in a heartbeat." "Come in," Bjorn said, beckoning. "It's been a while. Tell me everything." Dewar accepted. He had hoped to learn from Bjorn, to see whether the skin changer's gift might teach him anything about raising his animagus beyond a mere owl. He nursed ambitions of transforming into greater magical birds. A phoenix, a thunderbird, not dragons or unicorns, which an owl form could never become, but mighty avian creatures whose powers would be extraordinary. A phoenix's rebirth and a thunderbird's weather-wielding gifts were irresistible thoughts. Over a meal, Dewar told Bjorn of the last months. When he mentioned Thorin's madness from dragon sickness, Bjorn snorted. "Dwarves, foolish, greedy lot. If the dragon's horde poisoned him, that's his own doing." Bjorn had never liked dwarves. He had sheltered them once only because they shared a common enemy. He had little sympathy now. His attention, though, snagged on another detail. "You really tamed a dragon?" he asked, eyes wide. Dewar nodded. Bjorn's admiration was hearty and immediate. "Unheard of. Amazing. You'll be famed all over Middle-earth. Dragonbinder? Smaug's master? Dragon Knight. That suits you best, you who commands a dragon." As Bjorn playfully argued over titles, Dewar returned to his reason for visiting, learning about the nature of Bjorn's transformation. Bjorn shook his head. "Our gift is a blood thing, handed down from our forebears. Old tales say men of the misty mountains were blessed by wild spirits and so became bear-touched. It's natural to us. It awakens in time. I don't know how to teach it." Dewar had expected as much, but still asked if Bjorn would change now so he could observe. Bjorn agreed. He warned that when he shifted, his clothes would become part of him and be ruined, so he stripped first. Dewar did his best to look scholarly and uninterested as the burly man stood naked to concentrate, a small martyrdom in the name of research. Bjorn drew in a great breath. His face creased and his muscles tensed. Veins bulged on his forehead, his fists clenched, and his body seemed to swell. Hair sprouted like black waves and thickened into a dark pelt. Where once stood a man, now a house-sized black bear loomed, immense and hulking, the transformation complete. 100 cycle, Magics or Wonder 11, magic circulation. When Bjorn shifted into a giant bear, a raw, primal sense of pressure washed over them all. Even knowing the bear was Bjorn, everyone felt the urge to step back. "Bjorn, don't move for a moment. May I examine the magic circulation in your body?" Dewey asked. The bear nodded, giving permission. Dewey placed his hand on the bear's fur and slowly fed a thread of magic into it, trying to sense how magic flowed through the creature. The reason animagi cannot become true magical creatures is rooted in the way a wizard's magic operates versus a creature's magic. If those systems are forcibly merged or broken, the results can be catastrophic and unpredictable. The quintuped, it was said, had originated from a wizard's transformation gone wrong. Once its internal magic system changed, it could never go back. In the magical world, few wizards attempted animagus, and fewer still succeeded. Only 7 animaga had been officially registered throughout the 20th century, and even including unregistered cases, the number remained tiny. There were no successful precedents for transforming into true magical beings, and the failed cases had been horrendous. Wizards therefore avoided attempting such transformations. Bjorn, however, was different. Though a skin changer rather than a true magical beast, his ability to switch between human and giant bear offered a valuable clue. If Dewey could understand how Bjorn's transformation worked and incorporate that mechanism into his animagus study, he might be able to expand what animagi could do. Dewey probed Bjorn's inner magic system, comparing it to his own. Bjorn's body held a surprising amount of magic, enough to explain his transformations. As Dewey traced the circulation patterns, his expression grew more solemn. After a long moment, he withdrew his hand and sighed. "Thank you, Bjorn. You can change back now." The bear rumbled and shrank until Bjorn stood human once more. He dressed, rubbing his hands together. "Any discoveries?" "A great many," Dewey said. "Your internal magic circulation is unusual. If I could fully replicate it, I might unlock how a skin changer switches forms." "But your system is extremely complex," he added. "To record it precisely would take years, possibly much longer. There can be no errors or omissions, or it could cause a serious magical accident." Magic circulation here resembled the key meridians of wuxia stories, a complete, intricate system running through the body. Wizardly magic and creature magic were incompatible. One body could not safely contain both systems without grave consequences: loss of balance and sanity, becoming a squib at best, or permanently turning into a beast at worst, with the soul trapped in a form it could no longer escape. What set Bjorn apart, Dewey discovered, was that he possessed two distinct circulation systems, one when human, another when in bear form, and he could switch between them at will. If Dewey could identify the switching mechanism, he might find a way to make animagus transformations into magical creatures possible. But that was still far off. Simply recording Bjorn's systems with perfect accuracy would be a massive, painstaking undertaking. Bjorn waved a paw dismissively. "It's nothing. If you want to study it, come whenever. Stay if you like. There's no one here but me. You're welcome any time." Dewey was grateful. He had expected Bjorn might refuse or be hostile. A skin changer's transformation was central to his people's power, and exposing it could be dangerous. Bjorn's trust was significant, and Dewey meant to repay it. He decided the best way to return the favor was to make Bjorn a wand. "You can really make me a wand?" Bjorn asked in surprise. "I'm a skin changer. Can I even use one?" "You have magic inside you, so yes," Dewey said. "If you don't believe me, try mine." He handed Bjorn his wand and taught him a simple lumos. The wand wasn't a perfect fit, but Bjorn managed to coax a faint glow from its tip. The wonder on his face was plain. He broke into a delighted smile. "Dewey, please make me one. This is incredible." Dewey smiled. "That's exactly what I planned." Making a proper wand meant finding a suitable wand wood and a compatible core. Dewey had Galadriel's hair and eagle feathers among possible cores, but neither paired well with Bjorn. Only when Bjorn produced a warg he had killed the day before did Dewey find a usable core, the warg's heartstring. For the wand wood, Dewey flew into Mirkwood and cut a length of heartwood from a very old oak. With materials gathered, Dewey could begin crafting Bjorn's wand, but not here. Wand making was a lengthy, delicate process, and Dewey had been away from River Valley City long enough to worry whether the orc army had arrived and how the dragon might have acted in his absence. "Bjorn, want to try flu travel to River Valley City?" Dewey asked with a grin. Gandalf was busy preparing defenses, and it would be useful to have Bjorn join the fight. In the original timeline, Bjorn had fought in the Battle of the Five Armies and had inflicted heavy losses on the orcs. Dewey hoped for similar help now. At the mention of killing orcs, Bjorn agreed without hesitation. His people had suffered at the hands of orcs. The hatred ran deep. After arranging for his animals, the two went through the fireplace using flue powder. Green flames swirled in River Valley City's hearth. Dewey came through first, then Bjorn's massive silhouette followed. Bjorn ducked awkwardly, inhaling a mouthful of soot and beginning to cough. Dewey waved a hand to brush the soot away, amused. "Bjorn, you all right?" Bjorn coughed until his eyes watered, then raised a hand and forced a grin. "Cough, cough, I'm fine." Bilbo, who had heard the commotion, hurried in from outside. His face brightened at the sight of them. "Dewey, Mr. Bjorn, how did you make it here together?" "Good to see you, Mr. Baggins," Bjorn said politely. He had a fondness for the Hobbit. Dewey explained, "I invited Bjorn. He'll help us against the orcs. Where's Gandalf? Has he returned? Bilbo asked. He's not back yet, Bilbo replied. Bard and the Lake Town refugees have come here, but Gandalf went to Mirkwood. Bard said he hoped to persuade the elves to ally with humans and dwarves. Dewey frowned. That would likely be a difficult mission. Thranduil cared only for his own realm, not for Middle-earth politics. An alliance with dwarves seemed especially unlikely. He asked instead, what are Bard and the others doing now? Repairing defenses, Bilbo said. They're trying to plug the gaps in the city walls to hold off the orcs. Let's go take a look, Dewey said, and the three made their way to Bard's position. Along the route, Dewey watched the Lake Town refugees pitching crude tents against ruined walls and frowned. It was the turn from autumn to winter. The northern chill was sharpening. Those makeshift shelters would not keep people warm for long. At the city gate, Bard and his men were hauling stones, stacking them to fill breaches in the wall. He paused after placing a heavy block, breathing hard. When he saw Dewey and the others, he brightened. Dewey, I heard you were away a long time. Didn't expect you back so soon. We're repairing the walls? Dewey asked. Bard nodded. They're badly damaged, but still usable. We must fix them before the orcs arrive, or they'll pour in and slaughter everyone. I'll help. Dewey drew his wand and flicked it. Reparo. The air seemed to stutter, then run backward. Stones that had been scattered rose, rubble inverted, and slid back into place. One damaged section after another sealed, everything mended except for the portions burned by dragonfire, which the spell could not fully restore. Chapter 113. Elf Army. Everyone who watched the city wall as it was mended in an instant stood frozen in stunned silence. Only Bilbo, who had already seen Dewey's abilities, wore a broad, satisfied smile. Dewey did not stop. He walked through the streets, waving his wand. Wherever he passed, ruined buildings knitted themselves back together. The sight left the thousands of townspeople staring at him in awed disbelief. When most of the repairs were finished, Dewey finally lowered his wand and took a deep breath. It's finally habitable, he said. River Valley City was still battered and far from whole, but houses that had survived the dragon's fire were restored to livable condition rather than the tents and shacks they'd been reduced to. Bard stood there full of gratitude and relief, bowing to Dewey. I cannot express how grateful we are, black-robed wizard Dewey. Your benevolence has saved us. Dewey waved his hand. I'm glad I could help, but my magic can't fix every gap. You will still have to repair some things by hand. Bard shook his head vigorously. This is more than enough. Perhaps I can help, said a deep voice stepped forward. Who is this? Bard asked, puzzled. This is Bjorn, Dewey replied. He lives to the west of Mirkwood, near the Anduin. He's a helper I invited to fight the orcs. Bjorn shrugged off his coat and in seconds transformed into a bear as tall as the city wall. His sheer size and presence made the townsfolk cry out. When they saw the bear did not attack, their fear turned into wonder. Bard, too, was astonished. Anyone called by Dewey was bound to be extraordinary. In bear form, Bjorn easily lifted huge stones and began fitting them into the gaps in the wall. Overjoyed, Bard organized the townspeople to work alongside the giant bear. Dewey did not join them. Instead, he returned to his lodgings to begin crafting wands. Bilbo stayed, helping in any small way he could. Time passed quickly. When Dewey finished Bjorn's wand, he looked pleased. Warg heartstring core, oak shaft, 16 inches long. It's the longest wand I've ever made, almost as long as a staff. Dewey handed the wand to Bjorn. Try it. Bjorn, both excited and nervous, took it carefully and waved. The wand sprouted branches, bloomed, fruited, and finally bore a ripe acorn. Bjorn picked it joyfully, feeling its fierce life force. He tucked it away, planning to plant it in his garden back home. Dewey was delighted. Watching a wand find its right owner filled him with the same quiet satisfaction Ollivander must feel. Bjorn stroked the wand reverently. Thank you, Dewey. Thank you for making this for me. Dewey smiled. We're friends, aren't we? We are. Dewey taught Bjorn a few basic spells. Seeing Bjorn cast Incendio and Aguamenti successfully made Dewey feel like a proud professor. He fancied that if he were at Hogwarts, he might even be fit to teach. After teaching, Dewey took something from his pouch that made Bjorn and Bilbo's eyes widen. A giant eaglet curled inside. Is this a giant eagle? They asked. How could I have stolen it? The Eagle King entrusted him to me, Dewey said, a little embarrassed. Good. Bjorn said, relieved. The giant eagles rule the sky? Few dare harm them. I feared you'd been attacked for carrying off one of their young. Dwyer used his wand to examine the eaglet. The diagnosis made him frown. No wonder the eagles had abandoned it. This chick had been underdeveloped in the egg and had never competed well with its siblings for food after hatching. If Dwyer had not taken it away, it would likely have starved or died from weakness. Poor thing, Dwyer said softly. Don't worry, I'll find a way to help you grow strong. Someday, you'll soar like the others. The eaglet, surprisingly intelligent, chirped in response. Given the bird's condition, Dwyer decided the best immediate help was potions. He rummaged through another pouch and produced the last bottle of a soothing draught. Drink this, little one. It will help. The eaglet, already unnervingly sensible for its age, opened its beak and swallowed the bitter potion without protest. The effect was swift. Color returned to its feathers, its cry grew stronger, and its gaze at Dwyer filled with adoring trust. Bjorn and Bilbo noticed the change and laughed. Looks like he's taken to you, Dwyer. You've got yourself a giant eagle companion. Dwyer's smile widened. He knew, though, that the soothing potion had only bought them time. The eaglet's congenital weakness would need restorative and blood-strengthening potions. Some necessary ingredients existed only in other worlds, so he would have to find substitutions, and he could consult Radagast, Middle-earth's herbology master, for help. Have you named him? Bilbo asked, studying the eaglet, which was already taller than the hobbit. Dwyer considered and then said, Thorondor. I hope he can bear the name of his ancestor and learn to fly as high. Thorondor, Bjorn repeated in surprise. The name belonged to the first of the great eagles, the ancestor who had led the eagle clans in the wars of the First Age, aiding the Valar and the Elves against Morgoth. It was a mighty name for a sickly chick, but the eaglet accepted it without complaint. Fearing the bird would be restless under his care, Dwyer released it into Bilbo's charge. Bilbo took the responsibility to heart. He delighted in the eaglet, bought meat with gold coins from Lake Town to feed Thorondor, and proved more diligent in its care than Dwyer himself. Once the eaglet was settled, Dwyer returned to studying the Book of Abraham. The book was full of alchemical runes and knowledge, and at its heart was the method for making the Philosopher's Stone. Even with Nicholas Flamel's notes and commentary, its contents were dense and baffling. Dwyer had barely begun learning alchemy. He was still working through the basics, so he read the book from the beginning. Fortunately, after enrolling, he had received a runic dictionary and had studied runes from the start. Runes were the essential foundation for alchemy, and knowing them let him make some sense of the alchemical passages. Still, before Dwyer could get very far into basic alchemical theory, Gandalf returned, accompanied by King Thranduil and an elven army. Dwyer stepped outside. Thranduil's troops in gleaming golden armor and perfect formation stood beyond the town, and at their head Thranduil rode a giant stag whose antlers spread like a crown. Dwyer turned to Gandalf. Gandalf, were you able to persuade Thranduil? Gandalf smiled wryly. Not exactly. Thranduil is as stubborn as any dwarf. He came to claim a white gemstone necklace the dwarves once commissioned. He brought an army for a necklace? Bard asked in disbelief. It was a relic of deep meaning to him. His late wife's necklace, Gandalf said. But there is good news. Thranduil is willing to ally with the people of Lake Town, and he has brought enough supplies to last through the winter. Bard's worry melted into relief. Thranduil's provisions were a godsend. He led the town out to meet the elves. Your Majesty Thranduil, I did not expect you to come. Thranduil, tall and imperious atop his stag, acknowledged Bard. I heard you needed aid. I brought supplies. Elves drove carts laden with grain, vegetables, and salted meat. Bard could hardly contain his gratitude. The supplies would see Lake Town through winter and then some. You have saved us, Bard said. I cannot thank you enough. Thranduil waved his hand. There is no need for thanks. I did not come only for charity. I came to retrieve what is mine, something the dwarves have kept hidden. Bard said nothing, but he welcomed Thranduil and the elven host into River Valley City. Thranduil did not refuse. He and a detachment of guards entered with Bard. He looked the rebuilt walls over, surprise in his expression. This city was broken by a dragon. When did you find craftsmen skilled enough to restore walls in just days? Bard answered proudly. Thanks to Wizard Dewar. His magic repaired buildings like a miracle, and Mr. Bjorn transformed into a giant bear and carried the stones for us. That is why our walls look so strong. Thranduil nodded, curiosity deepening into admiration as he spotted Dewar among the defenders. Dewar stepped forward and greeted him. Your Majesty, Thranduil, good to see you. Thranduil dismounted from his stag. The Dragon Tamer, Master over Smog, black-robed Wizard Dewar. Your name is known even in Mirkwood. His gaze toward Dewar was openly admiring. Chapter 114, Confrontation. Thranduil's praise brought a modest smile to Dewy's face. Your Majesty, you flatter me. This wasn't my doing alone. Oh, by the way, where is Prince Legolas? I haven't seen him, Thranduil asked, a pleased curl to his lips at the mention of his favorite son. He's tracking some orc footprints, Dewy replied. He followed them north. He should be back in a few days. At the mention of orcs, Gandalf's face soured and he frowned. Your Majesty, do you know where these orcs appeared? Thranduil shrugged. They came from the northern misty mountains, from around Mount Gundabad. Legolas was concerned, so he went after them. As for me, I came for the white sapphire necklace I had made for my late queen. Outside affairs rarely stir me. When Smog fell on the lonely mountain, we stood aside, and I do not intend to intervene now, unless Thorin returns what belongs to my queen. Gandalf tried again. Your Majesty, the orcs could strike at any moment. This quarrel with Thorin will only give them an opening. Thranduil cut him off with a raised hand. This is not my decision to make. As soon as Thorin Oakenshield returns, what is mine, we will march back at once. A thin edge of bitterness creased his tone. Do you truly think Thorin will give it up? The madness of dragon sickness runs in their blood. I saw his grandfather fall to it myself. I do not think Thorin is any different. The white sapphire, less famed than the Arkenstone but still a priceless jewel, had been claimed by Thror in his madness years ago and never returned. That refusal birthed deep enmity between the elves of the woodland realm and the dwarves of the lonely mountain, and it partly explained why the elves had done nothing when Smog ravaged the mountain. Gandalf sighed. Thorin's mind, twisted by dragon sickness, would be unlikely to part easily with treasure. Gandalf's deeper worry was that Thranduil wasn't the only claimant. Bard of Laketown intended to demand compensation for Esgaroth's losses as a descendant of Girion. The hoard at the Lonely Mountain held not only dwarven treasure, but the wealth of the men of Laketown as well. Bard did not want war between elves, men, and dwarves, so he asked Thranduil for leave to speak with Thorin first. Thranduil agreed, though he kept his army ready. If Bard failed, he would march to take the sapphire by force. Gandalf, uneasy, decided to go with Bard and try to avert war. Dewy did not join them. He took out the Palantir to check on Smog. He had not kept close watch on the dragon these past days and wanted to know where the beast had wandered. Above the desolation, north of the Lonely Mountain, Smog had just killed and roasted a wild ox. After feasting, the dragon suddenly grew alert and looked skyward. He felt eyes upon him, familiar and unseen. Master, he muttered, uncertain. One of the oath bands on his neck tightened and warmed. The oath was absolute. Wherever Smog sat, if Dewy summoned him, he must answer. Feeling that pull, Smog abandoned any lingering plans and pushed himself toward the Lonely Mountain as swiftly as his still-healing wings allowed. He could not fly, he had to run. Dewy watched the Palantir and snorted. He had sensed Smog's rebellious fantasies, escaped north, hiding in the Grey Mountains, waiting for Dewy's death, and each time the dragon thought of such treachery, the oath tormented him. Dewy sometimes increased that torment to be sure the dragon learned his place. Seeing Smog hasten back, Dewy turned his attention to the misty mountains. Mount Gundabad filled the crystal's view. Bolg had gathered his forces, trolls, orcs, wargs, and swarms of great bats blotting the sky. Tens of thousands surged out of the fortress, heading for the Lonely Mountain. Dewy's eyes narrowed. Then, to his surprise, he saw two figures tucked behind a boulder among the rocks, Legolas and Tauriel, watching the orc host from concealment. Legolas stiffened, a hand rising. He turned his head and scanned the sky behind him. "Do you feel it?" Tauriel asked softly. He hesitated. "Someone's watching us." Dewy smiled faintly. That perceptiveness was why Thranduil prized him. He lingered on the scene a moment longer, then checked east of the Lonely Mountain. Dwarf holds in the Iron Hills lay that way. Dine's second Ironfoot ruled there. Thorin and his company were only 14 in the mountain. No matter how well they defended the gate, they could not hold against an elven army without aid. If Thorin were sane, he would seek Dine's help. Sure enough, Dewey saw ranks of dwarves on the eastern peaks, an army of tens of thousands marching toward the mountain. With the armaments of the 5 armies converging, Dewey put the Palantir away. He found Bjorn and Bilbo. Go to the Lonely Mountain Gate. The orcs approach. We can't let them begin the fight. Bjorn's eyes flashed. At last. Bilbo was nervous but determined. He gripped his elven blade. Dewey handed Bjorn a flying broom. You take Bilbo behind me. I'll go stop them first. With that, he shifted, animagus-like, into a great horned owl and launched toward the mountain gate. Bjorn had flown one of those brooms before. Dewey trusted him to see Bilbo safely there. At the Lonely Mountain Gate, tension crackled in the air. Thranduil, in full armor and mounted on a towering stag, stood before the elven host. Gandalf implored, voice urgent, Thorin, lay down your arms. Open the gate. That treasure will be your ruin. You cannot win. Do not doom those who have followed you. Thorin paced the ramparts, eyes bright and feverish. Enough, Gandalf, he snapped. Your words are wasted on one who feigns sleep. Thranduil's voice cut through, cold and commanding. Thorin Oakenshield, now choose, peace or war. The sight of tens of thousands of elven spears glinting below made even Thorin's steady heart falter. He craned his neck eastward, searching the horizon as if for impossible aid. At last a raven alit on the wall. Relief surged through him, reinforcements. His voice rang out to Thranduil without hesitation. I choose war. Thranduil blinked, surprised at Thorin's sudden resolve. Then he, too, looked east. The hills smoked with movement. The Iron Hills army had reached the ridges, heavy-armed dwarves marching in close formation. Dine's sick Ironfoot sat astride a warsow at their head, hammer in hand, a grim smile beneath his beard. Alert, Thranduil ordered, and the elven ranks bristled, spears leveled toward the approaching dwarves. The 2 armies readied as if a spark could set them alight. Dine rode forward to the crest, addressing the conflicting hosts with a wry, booming voice. Good morning, all. I have a small suggestion, if you'll indulge me. He paused, hammer resting easily on his shoulder. Could you all perhaps move as far away from each other as possible? 115. Battle of the 5 armies. All of you, get out! Get out now! Dine Ironfoot roared, his voice thick with contempt. Lord Dine, may I speak? Gandalf the Grey stepped forward from the elven lines and addressed him. Gandalf the Grey? Dine narrowed his eyes. Tell these rabble to leave at once, or I'll water the earth with their blood. There should not be war between dwarves, men, and elves, Gandalf said solemn. An orc army is marching on Erebor. Stand down. Point your weapons at the enemy, together. I will not stand down before elves, especially not this treacherous woodland king. Dane barked, and his finger jabbed at Thranduil. He still nurses hatred for my kin. If he stands between me and my king, I will cut his pretty head open. Let's see if he can smile then. Thranduil's laugh was cold, as if directed at something already dead. Dane, wait! Dane ignored Gandalf's appeal and strode back toward his line, preparing for a charge. Let him come, Thranduil snorted, disdain clear in his tone. Dine's temper flared the more for it. Do you think I fear you, pointy-eared princess? Hear me, warriors. Let's give these bastards a proper beating. A horn blasted. The dwarves charged down the hill toward the elves. Archers, Thranduil commanded. The woodland realm's bowmen drew and loosed in an instant. Thousands upon thousands of arrows arced toward the dwarf ranks. A great horned owl cut through the rain of arrows, then shed feather and shape in mid-air to become a man. Suspended for a moment, he waved his wand, and the hail of arrows melted into a scatter of blossoms on the wind. Duyere, light as a feather, floated down and landed in the open between the lines. The dwarves, already committed to their charge, skidded to a halt at his sudden appearance. Who are you? Dane demanded, eyeing the flowers on the ground suspiciously. Black-robed wizard Duyere, the man called back, his voice carrying. I am here to stop this senseless slaughter. An orc host marches from Mount Gundabad, hundreds of thousands, and will be upon us within an hour or 2. If you would not be annihilated, prepare to defend Erebor, not each other. The gathered forces stirred. The combined elves, dwarves, and men numbered only in the tens of thousands. They were dwarfed by the orc host. How am I to trust you? Dine narrowed his eyes. I know you are allied with Gandalf. How do I know you're not lying for these pointy-eared bastards? Duyier's mouth curved in a brief sneer. Believe me or not, that is your affair. I don't owe you proof. Before Dine could answer, Bjorn came streaking across the sky, strangely astride a flying broom, clutching Bilbo. He leapt down, shifted into a vast bear, caught Bilbo in one hand, and unleashed a roar that sent Dine's mount rearing. Dine nearly toppled. Duyier left the dwarves and moved toward the elven and human lines. Gandalf hurried to his side. Duyier, have you seen them? Gandalf asked. Duyier nodded. With the Palantir. Gandalf's face grew darker. Hundreds of thousands. This will be a grievous fight. What startled Gandalf more was Thranduil's sudden command. The elves began sheathing their weapons and preparing to fall back. Your Majesty Thranduil, why retreat when such an army approaches? Gandalf demanded. Thranduil answered coolly, This is a war of orcs and dwarves. I must protect my people. Every elf of the woodland realm is precious. I will not squander them, defending a mountain that is not ours. But if Erebor falls, Gandalf countered, how long can Mirkwood stand? Do you think the orcs will spare the woodland realm? Thranduil's expression hardened. Gandalf, do not rail at me. I have fought since the dark days of Morgoth. I have seen kin fall and slew more orcs than you can count. My people will die to defend home, not as sacrifices for dwarves. Duyier interrupted, pointing toward a distant ridge. Look. They saw banners unfurling on a far mountain. A low, rolling roar rose from the earth. Then the ground split, and something, giant, tunneling beasts, broke free of the mountainside. Earth tore and heaved as great worm-like creatures bored through rock, and a tide of orcs poured from the newly opened tunnels, swarming the ridges and closing in from every side. Wargs and trolls mingled with them. The orcs' numbers were endless. To arms, Dane cried, abandoning his quarrel with Thranduil. The dwarves wheeled their formations to meet the new threat. Duyier watched the earthworks in fascinated disbelief. The speed at which the creatures tunneled was beyond anything he had known. The front-line dwarves smashed into the orcs first. Steel and gore meant brutal clamor. The orcs pressed their advantage with sheer volume, but the elves, who had been still, now sprang to life. Rain after rain of arrows fell on the invaders, and the men of Lake Town under Bard joined the fray. Bjorn, in his bear form, ripped through ranks as though the orcs were air. Gandalf, grim-faced, turned to Duyier. Where is your dragon? We need him. Duyier looked toward the peaks and smiled. He is here. Above the din, a shadow rose, and the great dragon Smog reared atop a mountain. He opened his jaws and sent rivers of flame down upon the orcs. For a few stunned seconds, the entire field froze. The orcs' formations erupted into chaos. Arrows and axe blows seized the advantage, and the elves and dwarves counterattacked with renewed ferocity. There are too many of them, Gandalf shouted, slicing down an orc. We must find Bolg. If we kill Bolg, their host will fall into disorder and the battle may turn. Duyier's face tightened. He raised the Palantir and searched. Found you, he murmured as an image coalesced. But the sight on the crystal changed abruptly. Bolg's image vanished and a blazing, malignant eye filled the glass, and with it a voice that crawled into the mind. Black-robed wizard Duyier, tamer of the dragon, the voice hissed. Aid us, and I will teach you how to forge a ring of power. Serve me, and I grant you dominion and endless life. A strand of Galadriel's hair, wound on his wrist, flared with holy radiance and hauled Duyier back from the brink of temptation. Sweat chilled his back. Sauron's hand reached through the Palantir. He had not expected to be enticed so soon, nor to be spoken to as Saruman had been. He dared not parley for long. Begone, he growled, and pulled out the crystal phial Galadriel had given him. He poured forth Arundel's light into the Palantir. The brilliance seared the burning eye. The cry that answered it was like the snapping of old iron, and the malignant vision vanished. Duyier did not lower the phial until he had illuminated the stone to be sure it hid no lingering corruption. When he finally sheathed it, he kept both the Palantir and the phial close. The thought that Sauron might watch him like a spy chilled him. He had still found Bolg's general location, though the orc captain was no longer on a command platform. He was hidden within a tunnel dug by the tunneling beasts. Duyier resolved to go and strike directly at the orc leadership. He looked to Bilbo. Bilbo, I will go for Bolg. It will not be safe here. I will take you to Thorin and the others up on the city wall. Bilbo shook his head, fingering his short elven blade. You needn't worry about me. I can look after myself. Dwyer hesitated, then smiled. Very well, take care. Still uneasy, he wrapped a few wards around the hobbit and then mounted a flying broom, urging it toward the tunnels. He had not gone far when a host of giant bats swarmed from the cover of the clouds, blotting out the sun. Duyr's wand flashed. Avada! The killing word hissed from his throat as spells snapped through the air. Spells met wing and claw. The bats fell like leaves. He pressed on, driving toward the hidden heart of the orc host, where Bolg waited and the fate of the battle might still be decided. Chapter 116, Earthworm Attack. On the battlefield at Erebor, the elven and dwarven armies, old rivals who had studied each other's fighting styles for centuries, moved together with uncanny coordination. The dwarves threw back the first wave of orcs, and the elven warriors flowed in to reinforce their lines. Bjorn, fueled by a deep hatred for orcs, charged into the enemy ranks in his great bear form and tore through them. His thick fur and immense bulk rendered most weapons useless. Wherever he passed, orcs were crushed and killed. Most eye-catching of all was the dragon Smaug. Though he could not yet fly, his destructive power remained terrifying. A single sweep of his tail, swung like a battering ram, cut down scores of orcs like a scythe. His dragon flame could melt steel as if it were wax. Anything it touched turned to ash and left the earth a scorched wasteland. Orcs avoided him as if he were an avenging god, fleeing in panic and throwing their own ranks into chaos. Smaug roared and spat flame as if unleashing all the fury he had been forced to contain. Above the field, Dewey battled a far different menace, a swarm of giant bats. They hung over the sky by the millions, blotting out the sun, bred by Sauron specifically to shield the Dark Army from daylight. Orcs recoiled in sunlight. Trolls could even turn to stone under it. A handful of such bats would have been trivial for Dewey, but millions were another matter. He could not hope to slay them all. He cast a silencing charm on himself to block the bats' ultrasonic screeches. Without it, their massed echolocation could have shattered him. Humph. You think your noise is power? Let me show you the mandrake's voice, Dewey muttered. He took a mandrake from his spatial bag, uprooted it from its pot, and moved it just outside the silencing charm's boundary. The mandrake woke with a face twisted by resentment and opened its mouth in a piercing, deadly shriek. Dewey followed with a sonorous charm, amplifying the cry until it cut across the sky like a blade. Giant bats, like ordinary bats, relied on sound. The mandrake's scream struck them with devastating effect. The airborne mass froze, bodies stiffening before thousands fell from the sky. Their tumble ripped a hole in the black ceiling. Sunlight pierced through. Orcs below, who were exposed to the rays, screamed in pain and faltered. Trolls struck by the light turned to stone. The falling bats rained into the orc formations, their impacts causing more carnage. Dewey drove the mandrake into the denser clusters of bats, turning it into a living weapon. Bat corpses pelted the ground and tore open the darkness above, multiplying the sunlight's reach and crippling the Dark Army's morale. Bring out the Morgul arrows! Shoot that wizard in the sky! Bolg bellowed in the black speech, panic and rage sharpening his voice. Rows of giant crossbows were hauled onto a hilltop and loaded with Morgul arrows, barbed shafts etched with dark enchantments meant to shatter protective spells. Fire! Bolg ordered, and a storm of Morgul arrows launched at Dewey, cutting off his escape. Dewey frowned and shot upward to evade. The arrows had anti-magic properties. Ordinary wards would not hold them. Unable to approach the orc command safely, he changed course and flew for Smaug instead. Smaug, who had been rampaging, gleefully opened his maw at Dewey's approach, then abruptly clamped his jaws shut and exhaled a thick cough of black smoke. "Master, what are your orders?" he asked, a guilty, servile tone intruding into his roar. Dewey landed on the dragon's broad back and pointed toward the distant hilltop where Bolg crouched. "Bolg is hiding there. Burn him with your dragon flame." "Your will is my command," Smaug replied. With Dewey on his back, he surged forward. His armor-like scales shrugged off the Morgul arrows. None could pierce him. With Smaug as a living rampart, Dewey was safe from those deadly bolts as they closed on Bolg's position. "Lord, the dragon's coming. The wizard's with him." An orc messenger cried in black speech, terror breaking through their discipline. Bolg's eyes flashed with fear, but his face hardened. "Attack the dragon with the earthworms," he roared. "If we drag him underground, he'll be out of the fight." The ground near the dragons trembled. Before they reached the hilltop, a massive earthworm burst from the soil and clamped its serrated maw around one of Smaug's legs, trying to pull him into an underworld tunnel. Smaug howled, bit down on the thing's head and shook, but the creature seemed rooted deep within the earth. It dug furiously, trying to drag the great dragon in. "Crucio!" Dewey cried from Smaug's back. The earthworm writhed and twisted in agony. Taking advantage of the pain, Smaug hauled back, and the worm was forced free, an enormous behemoth fully revealed. It was over 100 meters long and some 75 meters wide, its cylindrical hide rough and soil-colored. A flat, eyeless head bore a circular, saw-toothed mouth capable of pulverizing rock and soil as it burrowed. The exposed earthworm writhed to burrow again, but Smaug would not let it. He spewed scorching dragon flame across the creature, cooking the hide with blistering heat. The worm emitted a low, painful hiss and rolled wildly to smother the flames, sending tremors through the battlefield and flinging orcs off their feet. "Smaug, be careful. There may be more underground," Dewey warned. Just then, 2 more titans ripped free of the earth. Smaug narrowly avoided one that snapped at his neck and blasted it with flame. Another clamped onto his tail and tried to drag it down. "Avada Kedavra!" Dewey shouted and unleashed the killing curse. The targeted earthworm stiffened and went still, releasing Smaug's tail. Dewey grinned at the first true success with that deadly spell. The prior failures had left him shaken. The corpse at their feet restored his confidence. When the 2 new attackers were dealt with, the remaining worm withdrew beneath the surface without surfacing again. Dewey remained wary. The earthworms ruled the underworld and could have trapped Smaug at any moment. Moments later, the earth quaked once more, not with assault but with hauling. The lone earthworm hauled the 2 dead bodies back under, leaving 2 yawning, bottomless holes. Then the ground fell silent. Relieved, Dewey and Smaug resumed their charge toward Bolg. The sight of Smaug and the wizard had shattered orc morale. Many fled. "Lord Bolg, the earthworms couldn't stop him. Retreat, retreat into the tunnels," the terrified messenger babbled in the black speech. Bolg's face darkened. He swung his mace and smashed the messenger's skull, then drew himself up and barked the order he feared might yet save them. "Retreat into the tunnels." Chapter 116, Fiendfire. At Bolg's command, the orc army dove into the tunnels carved by the earthworm. By the time Dewey arrived on Smaug's back, he could only cut down the orcs who had failed to make it inside. The rest, including Bolg, had disappeared into the earth, leaving Dewey without a target. Bolg's cowardice, vanishing into the tunnels at the first sign of trouble, was infuriating and familiar. Smaug noticed Dewey's frustration and offered eagerly, "Master, it doesn't matter if Bolg hides. I'll breathe into those tunnels and burn every one of them alive." Dewey shook his head. "Have you forgotten they've got an earthworm? As long as it's there, they can surface wherever they please. How far do you think dragon fire reaches underground?" He never intended to chase them down into the tunnels. Once below, it would be the earthworm's realm. Bolg probably expected Dewey to pursue, but not pursuing didn't mean doing nothing. Dewey dropped from Smaug, walked to a tunnel mouth, raised his wand, and intoned with cold focus, "Fiendfire." An eerie blue wisp leapt from the wand tip, full of malign energy, violent and hungry, as if torn from the bowels of hell. It clung to the earth and immediately began devouring anything flammable, including briefly the caster. Dewey's face hardened. With a violent flick, he pulled the flame back toward him. It resisted like a thing with a will of its own, then streamed into the tunnel and spread outward. The fire swelled, lengths of it knitting into a towering serpentine python that filled the passage. Dewey slammed an exploding bolt against the tunnel mouth and collapsed it shut, then allowed himself a slow exhale. He had just cast the most dangerous curse in the magical world, Fiendfire. It was a high-level dark arts spell, notoriously difficult to control. The summoned demonic fire grew relentlessly, took monstrous shapes, and consumed anything flammable, friend, foe, even the caster, unless restrained. Most dark wizards would not dare. Only a handful in history, like Grindelwald, had been able to command it fully, even shaping it to spare the loyal and incinerate the traitorous. Dewey knew he did not possess such absolute control, which is why he immediately sealed the exits. There were only orcs down there, no innocents to endanger. Smaug had watched in growing apprehension. The dragon's pupils narrowed. He took a step back, as if the flames themselves radiated a threat. "Master," he rumbled, voice thin with unease. "What was that? It felt different. More dangerous than my fire." "That's fiend fire," Dewey said simply. "Devil fire, hellfire. It feeds and grows. Without the right countercurse, it never stops." Smaug's awe deepened into reverence. He had long been proud of a breath that could melt dwarven armor. This was something else, an inferno that could reduce even dragon scales to ash. If Dewey had ever used this against him, Smaug thought, he might already be a cinder. The thought comforted and frightened him in turns. Dewey did not linger at the collapsed mouth. He sent Smaug back to harry the orcs and took to his broom, circling high and waiting. Not long after, a frantic tide of orcs burst from another tunnel. They were trampling over the bodies of comrades, fleeing something terrible. A massive rumble accompanied a spurt of blue flame as a fiendfire basilisk erupted from the earth, turning unlucky orcs to ash in an instant. The creature's hissing head lashed out like a demon escaped from a cage, trying to spread and consume the open ground. Dewey swept in on his broom and barked, "Back inside!" He pressed an invisible barrier onto the ablaze serpent, forcing it back toward the tunnel. The fiendfire, which had been feeding for a long time, was no newly cast spark. It lashed and spat at Dewey, flinging tongues of hellfire to try to break the ward. He wrestled with it, and every time the fire tried to force its head free, he smashed the exit with another explosion. He locked one tunnel after another, playing a deadly game of whack-a-mole, collapsing every mouth the flame sought to use, until the only option left was to force it back and seal it. Then a distant roar rose from far to the north, tens of thousands of meters away. Blue pillars shot up into the sky. A colossal fiery python expelled itself with a triumphant hiss, filling the air with hellish light. Dewey's jaw tightened. The fiendfire had found another outlet. He flew hard. By the time he arrived, the basilisk-formed fire had already stretched for hundreds of meters, hungrily devouring an earthworm and scorching the open ground. Bolg and a handful of orcs were scrambling, miraculously still alive, trying to run from the pursuing inferno. Dewey did not hesitate. "Diffindo!" Bolg's terror froze into a single instant. His body was rent to pieces, as if cleaved by invisible blades. Killing the orc leader was incidental, swift and brutal. Then Dewey turned all his attention to the fiendfire. Finite incantatum. The counter-curse forged a great shimmering field around the infernal basilisk and began to contract, trying to choke the fire back. Finite incantatum could dispel most spells, even dark arts, but it had limits. A newly cast fiendfire would fall under it easily. A long-fed, enormous fiendfire, one that had consumed countless lives, could resist. This one had become so potent that it would normally take 4 or 5 aurors casting together to snuff it outright. Dewey did not have that luxury. He did not intend to extinguish it completely. He only meant to shove it back into the tunnels and seal that exit until the fire had nothing left to feed on. The basilisk writhed and lashed at the barrier, but could not break free. Then, as if insulted, the fire took on a new guise, a balrog. Horns arched from a molten head, bat-like wings spread, a long tail whipped the air, and a crackling whip lashed against the ward with volcanic force. The barrier shuddered. Dewey poured every ounce of power into the ward. "Get back into the tunnel!" The enchanted wall tightened like a vice, forcing the balrog form of the fiendfire to retreat. It had no true will, no ancient malice of a real balrog, but it mimicked rage fiercely enough to threaten the ward. Dewey struck the tunnel roof with an exploding bolt. The entrance collapsed in a thunderous roar, burying the infernal thing within. He reinforced the burial with spates of sealing magic until the passage was as tight as a tomb. Only then did he let himself relax. He levitated Bolg's severed head and rode his broom back to the field. On the plain below, the allied forces of elves, dwarves, and men had begun to turn the tide. Once Dewey had driven Bolg and the torment of fiendfire underground, orc morale crumbled. Gandalf had summoned the great eagles, who now struck terror from the sky. The orcs, pressed from above and shaken by the loss of leadership, started to break and retreat. If the orcs had not outnumbered the allied armies by far, the rout would have been complete. Dewey hovered over the battlefield and cast the death mask of Bolg down for all to see. He amplified his voice with a spell so it carried to every rank. "Orcs, your leader Bolg is dead. You are defeated." From Bolg, he produced a black horn, carved from some unknown beast and inscribed with runes. He wiped the mouthpiece casually and blew. The horn's note was piercing and filled the valley, a sound like an order. The vast bat swarm that had blackened the sky broke formation and scattered, as if obeying a command it could not refuse. Clouds parted, the sun cut through the gloom and bathed the field in brilliant light. Orcs who had been finding shelter in the dimness were suddenly exposed. The sunlight struck them like a physical blow. Many crumpled, incapacitated by the unaccustomed exposure. The trolls fared worse. Caught fully in the sun, they turned to stone where they stood, their faces frozen in terror for all time. Dewey watched the battlefield shift under the new light. He had risked a forbidden flame and wrestled it into the earth. For now, the day belonged to the free peoples, and to the grim, terrible price he had been willing to pay to win it. Chapter 117. After the War. When news swept over the battlefield that their leader Bolg was dead, the orc host immediately fell apart. With the giant bats gone and the sky no longer darkened, it felt like the end for the orcs. Countless of them fled, desperate to find shelter from the sun. Those who could not escape in time were burned and weakened by daylight. The elven and dwarven forces, both well-trained and disciplined, seized the moment and turned the rout into a slaughter, hunting the orcs without mercy. At some point, even Thorin and others who had been guarding Erebor's gates joined the fighting alongside Dine Ironfoot's dwarves. Most terrifying of all was Smaug. Like death incarnate, he swept the field with dragon fire and the crushing force of his tail. Bjorn, in bear form, was a living battering ram, crushing and tearing through orcs as he went. Helpless and panic-stricken, the orcs were cut down one by elves, dwarves, and men. The slaughter lasted until sunset. The hundreds of thousands of orcs Bolg had brought were almost wiped out. Those who survived only regained strength after dusk and fled into the mountains and wilds in disarray. Broken in spirit, they no longer posed a significant threat. When the fighting ended, King Thranduil, Lord Dane Ironfoot of the Iron Hills, Gandalf, Bilbo, Thorin, and others gathered on the field strewn with orc corpses. Except for Thranduil, immaculate as ever, they were all blood-splattered and disheveled. The old enmity between elves and dwarves had been washed away by battle. For the first time, they stood together in peace. All eyes, however, turned to Dewey. He had landed on his flying broomstick with Smaug close behind. Even knowing Smaug was under Dewey's control and had fought on their side, the elves and dwarves instinctively drew back. Thranduil, Thorin, and Dane tensed, watching the dragon warily. Dewey ordered Smaug to stay and approached the others alone. "Let us welcome the greatest contributor to the victory of the five armies, the slayer of the Orc Kings Azog and Bolg, the destroyer of orcs, master of dragons, Dewey in black robes," Gandalf cried, his voice bright with joy. Bilbo looked at Dewey with admiration. Thranduil's expression softened, and for the first time his arrogance fell away. He stepped forward. "Wizard Dewey," Thranduil said solemnly, "I must thank you. Had you not turned the tide, I fear my people would have bled here and might not have returned to Mirkwood." Thranduil was no fool. He saw plainly that if Dewey had not prevented the elves and dwarves from fighting one another and then single-handedly altered the battle's outcome, his host would have suffered grievously, perhaps even been annihilated. He bowed to Dewey with grave courtesy. Legolas bowed beside him. The elven army saluted in unison, swift, composed, sincere. Dewey, caught off guard by the sudden solemnity, flushed slightly. "Your Majesty Thranduil, you are too kind. I am honored to count the Woodland Realm as a friend." Thranduil brightened. "If you have the time, Dewey, please come to the Woodland Realm. I will give a feast in your honor. Legolas has often spoken of you. He looks forward to your visit." "After this is over, I will certainly visit," Dewey promised, smiling. With Dewey's power and his dragon plainly proved, befriending him offered only advantage to the Woodland Realm. Seeing Thranduil's courtship, the dwarves would not be outdone. Dane Ironfoot strode forward, casting aside his usual roughness in favor of enthusiasm. "And the Iron Hills welcomes you as well. Dewyer is a friend acknowledged by Dane Ironfoot. You will always find a welcome there. He added, to show our thanks, the Iron Hills will forge a set of dragon armor for your great dragon. I hope you will accept. Dewey blinked. He had not expected such an offer. Smaug's eyes gleamed with desire at the mention of armor. It happened that black arrows had stripped scales from over Smaug's heart, leaving a weakness. Armor forged by the dwarves would remedy that. Dewey gratefully accepted on Smaug's behalf. The others looked at Dane with new respect. Thranduil shaded his eyes and regarded the dwarf with a wary, calculating look. Dane's crude demeanor disguised a shrewdness they had not guessed. Thorin watched the flattery Dewey received from both elves and dwarves with mixed feelings. He stepped forward, took a breath, and addressed Dewey gravely. Dewyer, thank you for helping me reclaim Erebor from the dragon, and for now aiding us against the orcs, saving Erebor from falling. I am sorry for the disrespectful things I said earlier while I was plagued by dragon sickness. It was not my true self. Dewey's smile faded into a calm expression. I'm glad to see you yourself again. I accept your apology. Relief washed over Thorin. Don't worry, your 1/10 of the treasure will be delivered promptly. And though Bilbo did not find the Arkenstone, he will not be shorted his share either. Dewey nodded, offering Thorin approval. Whatever had shaken Thorin back to sanity, he now stood more like a king. Thranduil seized the chance to request the white gemstone necklace that had belonged to his late wife. Rather than seize it, he offered to pay richly for it. Thorin, newly clear-minded, said he would return the necklace of his own will and refused payment, hoping to mend relations between the kingdom under the mountain and the woodland realm. Thranduil's attitude softened further, and he promised to return the Glamdring that had been taken from Thorin. Thorin also pledged 1/14 of the treasure to Bard and the people of Laketown, 1/14 to his cousin Dane, for bringing the dwarven host across great distances to aid him, and shares to the 12 dwarves who had come with him to Erebor. His sudden generosity surprised everyone. Gandalf, who had once despaired of Thorin, was pleased. Erebor, under this Thorin, might yet prosper. With the white necklace reclaimed, Thranduil took his leave and led the elven army back to Mirkwood. A small, painful episode occurred before they departed. Tauriel begged permission to leave the woodland realm to be with Kili. Their closeness had begun when the captured company had been imprisoned in Mirkwood. Later, when the dwarves fled to Laketown, Tauriel had saved Kili from a Morgul arrow with King's foil. Love had grown between them without either fully realizing it at first. Thranduil could not approve. Elves live for ages while dwarves live but a few hundred years. Though elves are not truly immortal, they seldom die except by violence or by a grief that breaks them. For Thranduil, it was irrational to abandon an uncounted life for a brief mortal love. Legolas, who loved Tauriel as a sister, tried to dissuade her. Kili himself did not want her to give up her life for him. But Tauriel was resolute. Seeing her determination, Thranduil relented, and the two left Mirkwood together. Legolas bowed and returned to the woodland realm heavy-hearted. Kili, moved by Tauriel's sacrifice, asked Thorin's permission to leave Erebor and live with her. Thorin was torn. Kili was his nephew and right hand, and Thorin had no heirs. The throne would likely one day pass to Fili or Kili. Still, Kili's insistence and devotion won him over, and Thorin finally consented. Dewey said nothing about the unusual pairing, though he wondered, with secret curiosity, what the child of a dwarf and an elf might be like. More dwarf, more elf? He imagined for a moment a dwarf with pointed ears and almost laughed at the absurdity, shaking the thought away. As Kili and Tauriel prepared to leave, Dewey offered them his blessings and asked, "What are your plans? Where will you go?" They exchanged a look full of affection. Kili smiled brightly. "We plan to travel and settle where we find a place we love. If you ever come westward, please come to Weathertop as my guests. I would be honored to host you," Dewey said with a smile. 119. Divide the treasure. Inside the dwarf hall of the Lonely Mountain, Thorin sat on the throne at the head of the high table. Dewey, Gandalf, Dane, Bilbo, and Bard sat along the sides. Beorn, having ridden a great eagle after the orcs were beaten, had already returned home. The purpose of this gathering was the mountain of treasure in the vault. Thorin looked down at the assembly, a faint light in his eyes. I have already apportioned the treasure these past few days. The reason I summoned you here is so each of you may receive your rightful share. There is one regret, he added, the tone sharpening. We did not find the Arkenstone in the vault. This greatest treasure of my house is lost, or at least unseen, and its glory cannot be shown to you all. His gaze swept the room, watching faces carefully. What? The Arkenstone is gone? Dane was the most agitated. How could it be lost? Was it not hidden in the vault? How could it not be found? To the dwarves, the Arkenstone was like an imperial seal, the symbol of kingship. Whoever possessed it could command the 7 dwarf clans. Without it, Thorin might be lord of Durin's line, but could not be acknowledged by all dwarves. That difference mattered. The 7 clans, Longbeards, Firebeards, Broadbeams, Ironfists, Stiffbeards, Blacklocks, and Stonefoots, were scattered across Middle-earth, independent yet bound by tradition. In the days of Thrain I, the Arkenstone had been unearthed and shaped by dwarfcraft. The 7 families recognized it and pledged fealty to its holder. Now, hearing that it could not be found, the company was astonished. Bilbo felt a pang of guilt. He wondered whether, had he been more careful, he might have discovered the stone and prevented its loss. Gandalf, surprised too, looked thoughtfully at Bilbo and Dewey. Dewey himself watched with an air of detachment, as if unconcerned. Thorin unfixed his gaze on Dewey. Dewey, I would ask you for something. Lend me the Palantir so I may search for the Arkenstone's whereabouts. Let me try. All eyes swung to Dewey. He lifted his lids slightly, a light in his eyes, and spoke evenly. I can. But the Palantir has been seen by Sauron. He once tried to corrupt me through the stone. I was spared only by the protection of the Lady of Lorien. If you use it, be prepared to be seen by him and to be drawn toward darkness. Before Thorin could reply, Gandalf's face hardened, and he shook his head gravely. If Sauron can see Dewey through the Palantir, then he has one too. He can spy through the stone, and he can influence those who look into it, draw them under his sway. Sauron's power is more dangerous than dragon sickness. You do not know how easily you might be ensnared. Thorin, you cannot risk the Palantir. But Thorin, even now more himself than in the dragon's thrall, was stubborn. The Arkenstone is vital to my house. Gandalf, I will take that risk. You need not persuade me. I accept whatever follows. He rose from the throne and approached Dewey, eyes fixed on his. Dewey, grant me this. Dewey met his gaze and chuckled softly. Since you insist, I have no reason to refuse. He produced the Palantir from his spatial pouch and placed it on the table. Here. Thorin took it in both hands and peered into the crystal, concentrating on the vault and the Arkenstone's possible resting place. The mist within the stone cleared, revealing a view of the vault. Thorin's heart leapt. Could the Arkenstone still be there? He searched the image, but all he saw were mountains of gold and gems. No trace of the Arkenstone appeared. He searched again and again, unwilling to accept failure, but the crystal offered no hint. At last, he set the Palantir down, crushed. Could the Arkenstone really have been destroyed by the dragon's fire? Dewey tucked the stone away without comment. Very well, Thorin. We have looked. Now to business. Thorin, still disappointed, signaled Balin and the others to lead the company into the vault to claim their shares. He stared at the empty recess on the throne where the Arkenstone might have been set. The others entered the vault and were struck anew by the riches, cavernous space piled high with treasure, divided into several great heaps. Dewey, this is your share, 1/10 of the whole, Balin said, guiding him to the tallest mound. And these beside it are for Lord Dane, Master Bard, and for you, Bilbo. He nodded to several slightly smaller heaps. Dane's eyes shone at the sight of his portion. No dwarf could turn down such wealth. Bard, too, was pleased. It would repair Lake Town and restore its people. Bilbo, however, felt uneasy before the pile laid out for him. He had failed to secure the Arkenstone for Thorin and felt unworthy of such reward. He shook his head and stepped back. No, I didn't finish my task. I shouldn't take such treasure. Fili and Beaufort nudged him forward with laughing insistence. Don't be modest, Bilbo. Even without the Arkenstone, you were with us on every turn. In Mirkwood, you saved us from the giant spiders and freed us from the elven dungeons. You earned this. Still, Bilbo felt he did not deserve so much. The others smiled at this unfamiliar sight of a hobbit who refused riches. In the end, Bilbo decided to accept only a modest portion, insisting a little would suffice. Thorin, having steadied himself, came into the vault. When he saw Bilbo's reluctance, his favor for the hobbit grew, and he drew from the heaps a mithril shirt. He placed the gleaming mail about Bilbo's shoulders, a treasure beyond price, light as a feather, impenetrable to blade. Then he prepared to heap on gold and jewels. Dewey, unwilling that Bilbo go without, enchanted a money pouch with an undetectable extension charm and began filling it. Coins and gems flowed in until Bilbo loudly protested enough. Thorin's mouth twitched as he watched Dewey's extravagant generosity. He had not forgotten Dewey's unreasonable ways. Dewey paid him no mind. He produced a hide purse, expanding its interior with a flick of his wand until it could hold an area as large as half a field. The pouch, like a gluttonous whale, scrambled onto his mountain of gold and began sucking treasure into itself until his 10th was safely contained. The haul would make him one of the wealthiest in Middle-earth, second only to the Lonely Mountain itself. Bard and Dane, watching, felt a mixture of astonishment and envy. They wished for such a pouch themselves. Dewey cast similar charms on their purses as well, though not nearly as capacious as his own. Even so, the enchanted purses were treasured in their own right. After collecting his share, Dewey did not linger. He, Gandalf, Bilbo, and Bard left the Lonely Mountain and made their first stop at Lake Town, where they stayed for a few days. Dewey kept the town's fireplace for his use and gifted Bard a small phial of flue powder with an invitation to visit Weathertop. The house where Dewey and his companions stayed was later renovated by Bard into a splendid dwelling, second only to the Lord's mansion, and Bard formally granted Dewey permanent residence there. Dewey, for the moment, was unaware of these honors. He was already mounting Smaug, along with Gandalf and Bilbo, bound for Mirkwood. He had promised Thranduil to visit the woodland realm, and he would not break his word. More pressingly, he needed to take Smaug to Rivendell, so Elrond, Master Healer, might mend the dragon's wings. The undetectable extension charm Dewey had at hand could not hope to contain Smaug. The dragon's body alone stretched over 140 meters, his head without horns 12 meters high, and his wings spanned some 120 meters. To put such a creature into a confined pocket and allow it room to move would require a far grander device, perhaps Newt Scamander's suitcase, a power Dewey did not possess. So there was no choice but the slow, cumbersome route, carry Smaug across the misty mountains to Rivendell for treatment. Dewey had tried to persuade Gandalf and Bilbo to use Lake Town's fireplace and flew to get to Rivendell and wait, but the two preferred the cooler thrill of riding a dragon. They liked the journey as much as the destination, a taste of adventure not lost even on a certain gray-robed wizard. Chapter 120, Holy White Fruit. Dewey and his two companions arrived at the edge of Mirkwood to find the elves of the woodland realm already waiting. Dewey was surprised to see who had come out to meet them. "Your Highness Legolas, why did you come in person?" When you first approached Lake Town, the patrols spotted the dragon from a distance. "Father knew it was you and sent me to welcome you," Legolas replied with a gentle smile. His gaze flicked involuntarily to the vast shape of the dragon behind them. He had seen the creature at the Battle of the Lonely Mountain. Seeing it again still made him shiver. "Please follow me. Father has prepared a feast in your honor." To avoid unsettling the court with Smaug's presence, Dewey left the dragon outside the forest and followed Legolas and the elves into the woodland realm. King Thranduil sat upon his throne in a magnificent robe, wearing a crown woven of fiery red maple leaves and blue berries, his bearing noble and aloof, the very image of an elf king of an ancient wood. Unlike their last meeting, Thranduil rose from his seat to greet them, his manner reserved but courteous. "Welcome, welcome back. I have arranged a lavish feast with fine wines and delicacies. Please, you must honor us with your presence." Gandalf, acting as their diplomat, leaned on his staff, inclined his head in a bow, and said with a smile, "We are honored to attend your majesty's feast." Thranduil glanced toward Dewey. "Why is the dragon Smaug not with you?" "Smaug is too large. He would crush the trees. I left him waiting outside," Dewey explained. Thranduil nodded. "Even so, we cannot neglect such a great creature. I will have a separate banquet prepared for him outside the wood." Dewey had not expected such thoughtfulness and thanked the king. Thranduil, with Legolas at his side, led them into the great hall. The woodland realm's fare was more hearty than that of Rivendell. Where Rivendell favored light vegetarian dishes, Mirkwood's tables were rich with both meat and greens, and the elves here had a taste for strong drink, perhaps from their proximity to the dwarves of the Lonely Mountain. Their manners were still elegant, but the revelry was freer, less restrained. Music filled the hall. Elf maidens sang ancient elven epics, while attendants circulated among the tables, pouring wine. Thranduil and Gandalf spoke quietly of the wider affairs of Middle-earth. Dewey and Bilbo listened as Legolas translated the songs. In conversation, the name Toriel came up, the wood elf who loved Killy the dwarf, and Legolas grew pensive. He could not understand why she would give up the gift of long life for love that might end in a human span, but he offered his blessing all the same. The mood at the feast was warm when Thranduil turned to Dewey and announced something that surprised everyone. He intended to send Legolas out to gain experience, and he asked Dewey to take the prince with him on their travels. Legolas was taken aback. His father had not told him this beforehand. Dewey was not surprised at the request in principle. For a parent, thinking ahead for a child's future was natural. Thranduil wanted Legolas to see the world, to mature, and to stand on his own. Had Dewey not come, Thranduil would likely have dispatched Legolas to train abroad soon, perhaps to join future ventures such as the Fellowship as the realm's representative elf. With Dewey's presence and the king's knowledge of his abilities, Thranduil now wished to send Legolas off earlier. "Your Highness Legolas is an excellent archer and warrior. It would be our honor to have him with us," Dewey replied, and he could not refuse the king. Pleased, Thranduil signaled, and an elf brought a golden tray bearing a small jewel-encrusted box to Dewey. He examined it with curiosity and asked, "Your Majesty, what is this for?" "A token of gratitude," Thranduil said sincerely. "Gratitude that the elves were not wiped out at the Battle of Five Armies. There is also a favor I ask," the king added. "What favor?" "I would like you to make a magic staff for Legolas, one that belongs to him." Dewey was not greatly surprised by the request. He still owed staves to Elrohir, Eladon, and Arwen, and he accepted Thranduil's commission with the same mindset. One more staff would be no trouble. Still, he was curious about the contents of the treasure box. It was clearly valuable. When he opened it, his breath caught. Nestled on silk inside lay a silver-white fruit. "This is," Dewey began. "The fruit of the white tree," Gandalf said, astonished. "Thranduil, where did you get a fruit of the white tree?" Thranduil smiled slightly at the recognition and explained, "It is a seed from the white tree, Nimlot. In the Second Age, I visited Numenor. Nimlot had not yet been felled then. I picked a fruit and brought it home. I tried to plant it, but Mirkwood is not suited to its growth. It never took root." Gandalf's surprise deepened. Dewey held the fruit and felt its weight. This was no ordinary piece of fruit. He thought of the histories. After Ungoliant and Morgoth destroyed the two trees, Yavanna fashioned Galathelion for the Vanyar and Noldor, modeled on Telperion, though without its light. A descendant of Galathelion was planted on Tol Eressëa and came into friendship with Numenor, who planted a seed in their royal court and called the tree Nimlot. The white tree became a symbol of Numenor. When Sauron corrupted the realm and Nimlot was cut down, Isildur of the Faithful saved a fruit on the last night and later planted it in Minas Ithil, beginning the line of white trees in Gondor. Those trees suffered. One was burned when Minas Ithil fell, another withered in the Great Plague, and later plantings faded with the waning of Gondor's royal line. The fruit Thranduil offered was a seed of Nimlot, a descendant of a line that reached back to the trees of old. It was priceless. If the Dunedain or the people of Gondor knew, they would do anything to possess it. "Your Majesty, this is far too precious," Dewey said. Thranduil shook his head. "You need not refuse, Dewey. Though it has great historical value, its planting requirements are severe. If I could not feel any life in it, I would have thought it rotten. Still, do not hold too much hope. I suspect that aside from holy places like Valinor, there may be no environment left in Middle-earth where it can break its shell and sprout." Accepting Thranduil's frankness, Dewey felt obliged to take the seed and to craft the finest staff he could for Legolas. To receive such a gift and do nothing in return would trouble him. Outside the forest, the scene was no less lively. The wood elves, still wary of the dragon, had pushed carts laden with food before Smog and kept as much distance as possible. Whole roasted lambs and pigs, barrels of wine, the elves served him like a lord. Smog reveled in it, tearing down a lamb in a single bite, draining a barrel of wine, eyes half closed in bliss. He thought, this is true enjoyment. How had he never thought to have servants feed him like this before? With an appetite like his, Smog swallowed dozens of pigs and lambs and drank many barrels of wine before finally belching a blast of fire and feeling barely satisfied. The elven servers, who had held their composure through fear, now stood pale with outrage. The roast masters, exhausted from trying to keep up with the dragon's pace, were ready to strike. They had had enough. If Smog continued, the woodland realm would face a famine.